We are convinced that President Bush has won re-election with at least 286 electoral college votes.
You have heard it. The Bush-Cheney campaign declares victory, but what does that mean for Kerry Edwards? What do their teams say about it? Plus, Democrats and Republicans wrangle over results in Ohio, and provisional ballots threaten to become the new hanging chads. We'll also tell you how the balance of power will look in the Senate and House of Reps. Watch us all day long as the election drama unfolds this morning as we report what you decided in 2004.
There it is, the presidential race. And as we look at the big map right here, Wisconsin, Iowa, New Mexico, Nevada, still undecided at this hour, according to the Fox News. Folks, welcome aboard. Why do they call it election night? Shouldn't it just be election week? Because we don't have a winner yet.
Give the kids off until we figure it out. It would have been 36 days off last year. Well, this year we don't know if it's going to come to that. I think it does say that. But one thing is clear if you watch Andy Card, Steve and Kieran. By the way, good morning to you.
Nice to see you guys.
They feel it's over.
Take a look.
They absolutely do. Let's take a look.
It all comes down to Ohio and those 20 votes, and Fox News has declared that President Bush will be the winner there, even though there are a number of provisional ballots. The Secretary of State of Ohio has said that it would be statistically insurmountable for Mr. Kerry to pull one out in Ohio.
But can we say this? What Andy Card said wasn't spin. The president right now has accumulated more votes than any other presidential candidate in American history.
The popular vote,
popular
by 3 million at this point. A very different picture from what happened in 2000. But it has been a long night, as we've said. And as of right now, President Bush has 269 electoral votes. John Kerry has 242, each man short of the 270 needed for victory. There are 4 states that Fox News is calling right now as too close to call. That's Wisconsin, Iowa, Nevada, and New Mexico. We are projecting George Bush the winner in Ohio, although Kerry staffers are saying they still believe they have a chance of pulling out a win there. It's the provisional ballot situation. We're going to be talking much more about that throughout the next couple of hours.
All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of the graphics as you get up at 2 minutes after 6 Eastern Standard Time. In the national race, the President of the United States is leading with the popular vote. As you can see right there, he has 51% to Mr. Kerry, who has got 48%.
And put them together, Stephen, that's a heck of a turnout for this country.
Absolutely. George Bush has received in excess of about 57 million votes. John Kerry has 53 million. In other words, the president, right now, the popular vote leads by 4 million.
And when we talk about this election and we talk about the record number of people that did come out, and by just how close, right now in New Mexico, with 99% of the precincts in, George Bush is leading by only about 3,500 votes.
Yeah, and Kieran, look at Florida. Now, early on, it looked like John Kerry was going to take that according to the exit polls, but the president really has emerged, and this is not, it's close, but not nearly as close as last time, where we had to wait 30-plus days to find out. And so far, very few reports of any trouble at the booth.
Then in the swing state of Pennsylvania, things opposite from Florida, John Kerry receiving 51% of the vote, and the President of the United States will not put PA in his column. Nonetheless, at this hour, the President of the United States stands at, as you can see right down there, he's got 269, John Kerry 242. You need 270 to get the keys to the White House, and that is where Mike Emanuel is standing by right now. Michael.
Steve, Brian, Kieran, good morning. It was a late night for President Bush and Vice President Cheney, who monitored results throughout the evening. Just moments ago, White House Chief of Staff Andrew Card was sent over to the Reagan Building here in Washington to address supporters. Here's the White House Chief of Staff's take on the election.
Yeah, I got you. We are convinced that President Bush has won re-election with at least 286 electoral college votes. And he also had a margin of more than 3.5 million popular votes.
Let's be clear. The
The White House Chief of Staff talking about the state of Ohio as well. He says the Secretary of State in Ohio has told White House officials, Bush Cheney campaign officials, that the lead in Ohio, their 51-49 we have, is insurmountable. And so at this point, White House officials are convinced that the president has won the state of Ohio. Forgive me, in moments ago, Secretary Card talked about why we have not heard from the president so far.
President Bush decided to give Senator Kerry the respect of more time to reflect on the results of this election. The president will be making a statement later today.
So we expect to hear from the president himself a little later today. Andrew Card thanking the volunteers who worked across the country, also thanking the voters for delivering the vote that the White House believes has delivered George W. Bush another 4 years in office. Our count at Fox News is 269 electoral votes. Of course, 270 is the magic number. So we expect to hear from the president a little later this morning after getting some rest. Back to you guys in New York.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Mike. So the president got some sleep right away, but he left. He went to bed thinking he is won re-election, something his dad didn't do. And of course, the way it started out the night with the early returns on the exit polls, it looked though not only was President Bush going on to defeat, it looked, according to many, to be a blowout for John Kerry.
Our Fox News analysts, Susan Estridge, among other people, saying either the exit polls are completely wrong or George W. Bush loses. And it turns out that a lot of these exit polls were completely wrong.
What's interesting is a lot of the exit polls, which are proprietary to the networks, they're supposed to be secret. They're just supposed to let us know why people voted a certain way they did so we can explain it to people watching. And by the way, those are extraordinary pictures. While the polls were still open last night, the President of the United States in the private residence up on the second floor of the White House, as you can see, looks as if they get Architectural Digest. It looks like that's one of the magazines.
Yeah, he's with his family and friends,
Yeah.
and he looks
Watching
quite
TV.
relaxed, actually, as they're looking for the returns to come in there.
But nonetheless, the point I started to make was these exit polls were leaked. And the big question is, who leaked them? All of them showed John Kerry to be ahead by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% early in the afternoon.
In places like Florida and places like Ohio.
Right, exactly. There's been some suggestion that was this one of those things where if you get the word out, oh, Kerry's leading here, that they might effectively suppress the vote in states where nobody has voted yet. So it'll be interesting to see who leaked that stuff.
Right. And something else which is, of course, is secondary to the presidential election. But when you have the minority leader of the House up for re-election in Tom Daschle, and when you hear it's neck and neck, that's one thing. But when you actually see the results and find out that Tom Daschle today lost his Senate seat and a lot of power for his state in the process, you know there's something different happening in this country.
Yeah. John Thune in 2002 lost by a very slim margin to Tim Johnson. He ran again against Daschle, long time incumbent, and ended up pulling out a win by about 8,700 votes in that state. There's a look at the polls closing there in South Dakota with 100% of the precincts in. John Thune, 51%.
One other hotly contested battle out in Colorado. Peter Coors, the heir to the beer fortune, lost. Also down in Florida, it looks as if Martinez has picked up a win. So the GOP will control the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House as well.
Looks like they picked up 2 seats, correct? So they're up to 53 now in the Senate. And the Democrats are going to be looking for a new leader. Early word is it's Harry Reid of Iowa.
It'll be really interesting.
Nevada,
we talked a lot about the young vote, and we had Russell Simmons on the show yesterday, the Hip Hop Action Network, Vote or Die, all of these big campaigns. Interesting news coming in from the Associated Press. Under 10% of voters were between the ages of 18 and 24 years old, and it's about the same share of the electorate of the people that voted back in 2000. So a lot of questions as to there was so much excitement and there was so much buzz about the younger voters coming out, and didn't look like it.
The kids got a free concert, but they didn't go out and vote.
So in other words, George Bush, it does appear, beat Bruce Springsteen?
I think so.
According to the White House's numbers. All right.
And P. Diddy.
Of course, there are some who, in the Kerry camp, who are holding out hope that Ohio somehow, a la Florida, might wind up in Mr. Kerry's column. Jeff Goldblatt is live in Cleveland, where he has been all night long. Apparently, you're an overtime employee. Is that right, Jeff?
Sure, if you say so. But it's all about the story, and we're still here because there is still a story, at least according to the Kerry camp, but not according to the folks with the GOP in the state of Ohio. And Steve, if you're looking for a telltale sign of Republican confidence in the state of Ohio, well, you need not look any farther than the Democratic stronghold of the city of Cleveland, where GOP operatives were throwing back cocktails at a bar well before Fox News called Ohio for President Bush at midnight. Why were they so confident? Well, they had a lot of data at their disposal. In short, they knew the numbers were breaking in their favor according to their statistical models, most importantly in this county, Cuyahoga County. And we have been told by Republican operatives here in Cleveland that in order to win the state, the GOP knew the president needed to prevent John Kerry from getting a margin here that was greater than 250,000 votes. And the reason, that's the magic number we were told that John Kerry needed to eclipse in order to offset Republican gains downstate in conservative rock-ribbed Republican counties. At the end of the day, or early morning in this case, it was no surprise John Kerry took Cuyahoga County, but he won it by only 218,000 votes. And yes, there are still provisional ballots and absentee ballots and overseas ballots still uncounted. The Kerry campaign estimates that this total is about 250,000 outstanding votes, but the chairman of Ohio's Republican Party tells Fox News, and he told us at about 4:30 this morning, that that total is much lower, that it's about 140,000 votes, and that's the same number given out by Ohio Secretary of State Kim Blackwell, and they're all stressing that that number is about 140,000. And so for Kerry to take Ohio, then what the Republican chairman is telling us is that John Kerry would then need to win nearly 100% of those outstanding votes, which he says is downright unlikely. So bottom line, the state comes down to simple math.
If, in fact, the margin of victory for one candidate or the other is greater than the number of provisional ballots, then you can have a reasonable guess who won the election.
And Ohio Senators Mike DeWine and George Voinovich, who also reclaimed his Senate seat in a victory last night, they're calling on John Kerry to concede the state of Ohio in a statement saying, in part, quote, "Based on our experience in Ohio politics, we believe that the president's lead in Ohio is clear and that it cannot be surmounted." That said, however, we are still tracking the state of Ohio, still very close nevertheless. But Republicans in the state at this early hour definitely saying this is a George Bush state. And we're live here in Cleveland. I'm Jeff Goldblatt. Now back to you in New York.
All right,
Thanks,
hot off
Jeff.
the presses, we want to show you the New York Post. We just got this W2. Bush seals second term in White House. America's verdict. This we just got moments ago. This is the late city final from the New York Post. Fox
Right.
News, however, not making that projection at this point.
That's right.
Still 269 electoral votes in President Bush's column. 270 needed for the White House.
Steve, your years in the Home Shopping Network really coming into play here.
It's his
Thank you
weather
very much.
experience.
That's all.
He knows where to point.
And this is my coffee cup that I'm going to refill because we are taking a quick time out. Will there be a winner during our program? Stay with us.
And welcome back. It is about 16 minutes after the hour, and we are talking about the election, which is still not yet complete, but we have some races to tell you about. Republicans remain in control of the Senate, but there are two Senate races still too close to call in Florida and Alaska. The balance of power as of now looks like 53 Republicans, 44 Democrats, and 1 independent. As mentioned, Republican John Thune won his Senate race in South Dakota against incumbent Tom Daschle. Senator Daschle was considered the Republicans' top target in this year's Senate races. His Republican challenger, John Thune, served 3 terms in Congress. And the Senate race in Florida is too close to call, with 99% of the votes counted. But Republican Mel Martinez, who's in the lead, claimed victory earlier today. Democrat Betty Castor refused to concede, and she says is preparing to challenge the results. Martinez is a former housing secretary under President Bush. In Louisiana, Congressman David Vitter becomes the first Republican to be elected to Senate in the state since Reconstruction. Vitter beat out Democratic Congressman Chris John, winning more than 50% of the vote. And Vitter will take the seat of retiring Democratic Senator John Breaux. And now let's go back to Brian. Brian?
All right, Lauren, some incident analysis for you right now at 17 minutes after the hour. You decided, but the results as of this moment are still up in the air. Let's get a post-election debate from two of our Fox News contributors and some of the finest. Newsday columnist and Democratic strategist Ellis Hennigan and Republican strategist Angela McCloughan. Both are in D.C. this morning. Ellis, first off, here's what Andy Card said. Essentially, the president is gone to bed, but he believes he has won re-election. Do you agree with him?
Well, as soon as we count the votes in Ohio, we'll have a real good idea of that, won't we, Brian? Now the votes have not been counted, so we really don't know.
Well, so far, I guess you're correct. Do you believe that, Angela? Do you think that Ellis is playing it right as the GOP should?
Well, Brian, I think it's very noble that the president is giving the senator time to reflect, and maybe Ellis needs to reflect too. Ellis, hey, we won. President Bush now has 4 more years to better America, to finish a job that he started. And you guys just need to face reality. I do agree with you, though, that votes should be counted, but I think the votes have been counted.
Ellis, how much pressure is John Kerry, if any at all, now under after Andy Card went out and says we are convinced President Bush has won re-election with 286 electoral and a $3.5 million advantage in the popular vote?
Well, it's not Andy Card's comments that put anybody under pressure. It's the numbers. I mean, we will know, Brian, in the next few hours whether the number of outstanding votes is sufficiently small that this thing could be swayed. I mean, there's a real good chance that it won't be, but there's no reason that we ought to jump before we have those numbers.
Hey, Brian, at the end of the day, we knew that this race was going to be close, but when people went in and voted, they thought about national security. They thought about a person that they could trust. And I think with the Black and Latino vote, it was the abortion issue, gay marriage, and jobs. With the president signing this past jobs bill, we're going to create more jobs in the next 4 years. Kerry, while he's articulate, while he knew the policies, while he had so many plans, the American people just didn't trust him. He didn't connect with them, and you guys just need to accept it so we can move on.
Real quick, Ellis, so far, and we only have about 30 seconds left, but so far, one of the big stories will be at 4 o'clock Eastern time. It looked as though John Kerry was winning in a rout after the exit polls, and now, at the very least, John Kerry's just barely holding on. What happened?
Well, you got to say that if Ralph Nader was the big loser of the three, the exit polls was even a worse leader. There will be something really, really big that's going to happen with those exit polls. Brian, networks like this one, we paid good money for those polls. We have a lot better results to demand than that. They will change, I promise you.
All right, Ellis and Angela, stay right there because we have more to talk about, much more to talk about as we continue to look at the presidential race. We have not picked the next president of the United States or see if we retain the current one, but it's getting close. Some states still have to be counted. We also have to tell you the new breakdown in the Senate and in the House. Don't go away. Fox and Friends first in a moment.
And it's about 23 minutes past the hour, and here's some more election results for you. Here's what's happening with the balance of power in the House of Representatives. Republicans will maintain their decade-long control there, and it looks like the House GOP picked up several seats. One of the few bright spots for the Democrats, Illinois, where Melissa Bean narrowly beat Republican incumbent Phil Crane. Crane represented Chicago's northern suburbs for 35 years and was the longest-serving Republican in the House. In Texas, Republicans knocked off 4 veteran Democrats with the help of newly redrawn congressional district lines. The country's most expensive House race featured a battle of 2 incumbents in which GOP Representative Pete Sessions prevailed over Democrat Martin Frost. And in Kentucky's 4th District, Republicans also picked up an open Democratic seat. Businessman Jeff Davis beat out Democrat Nick Clooney, the father of actor George Clooney. And now let's go back to Brian Kilmeade.
All right, we're doing some instant analysis on some of those numbers as well as the presidential numbers. With us still is Angela McCloughan and Ellis Hennigan. They're over in Washington, D.C. Angela, I'll start with you. The president, as we mentioned, about 4 o'clock Eastern time, it looked as though it would be aroused. Someone looking into his body language as if the president knew he would be blown out. Now suddenly everything has changed. When you look at these numbers, without even talking to your people, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think sometimes, Brian, with exit polling, you can actually hurt your campaign rather than help it. And it was pretty daunting, maybe around 5 or 6 o'clock. A lot of us were like, what's going on? And I think by the exit polling, it could have hurt Kerry on the West Coast. It could have caused voters to stay at home that might have voted for Kerry, maybe even in New Mexico. Some of your Latinos that might have been, straddling the fence when they heard, well, Kerry's doing so well, they might have stayed at home. So I think with polling, either we need to augment the system or maybe ignore the system and just go out and vote and do our part.
Ellis, Iowa, Wisconsin, Nevada, and New Mexico. Here at Fox News, we have not declared them for either candidate, but it would be a major turn of events for John Kerry to prevail. At what point do you think the party, Kerry's camp, decides whether they're going to fight this, wait for the provisionals to come through, or concede?
Well, after a good night's sleep, Brian, I think they were up late last night. They're going to look at the numbers fresh. And, at that point, you have to make a real mathematical equation. Hey, can this thing be won under any circumstances? After working in a campaign as long as these guys have, if they think there's a slim chance, they're going to grab it and fight till the end. But if they decide there's not, why not say, hey, we lost, we tried, but we lost.
Ellis and Angela, thanks so much. We appreciate it. We still don't know who the next president will be, but we appreciate your analysis and insight. And guys, maybe the next step is in the courts.
Excellent intro. So, all things legal, we've called in Lise Wheel, legal expert here at the channel. Good morning to you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's understand a little bit about what's going on in Ohio, because Fox News has declared that the President of the United States will win Ohio. Andy Card has said about it 45 minutes ago that the Secretary of State there says that it is a statistical insurmountable lead the president has, even with the provisional ballots that are out there. And yet, with the provisional ballots, Ohio has 10 days to count them by law.
And isn't it ironic that the provisional ballot, which may now become the new Chad and Dimple of 2004, was really created to avoid all of this? I mean, it was really created to make a smoother process, streamline the process. But you're right, there could be a 10-day wait while all of those ballots are, first of all, counted, because we don't know how many we actually have.
Right.
I mean,
The Secretary of State there is saying that there could be as many as 250,000, or it could be much lower. And the question is up in the air now. It's the Help America Vote Act. It was passed after the 2000 problems. We don't know what the criteria is for deciding which ones are counted and which ones are not.
Brand new law, brand new election, and we've got people in the precincts going through each and every ballot trying to decide. You've got a Democrat and a Republican trying to decide on every ballot, is this signature real? Is this person actually registered or entitled to vote? And they're making those calls on a ballot by ballot prognosis. Look for then, if it's tight, for the Kerry camp to come in and say, due process for each electoral vote, or not electoral vote, each ballot. That could be then a claim that goes to the federal courts.
So the big question is whether or not the Bush camp and the Kerry camp will parachute a bunch of lawyers into Ohio.
They already have.
I understand
They're set up.
But if they go ahead and start a legal challenge, it's going to smell a lot like Florida. And in this case, it is not as close in Ohio as it was in Florida. And the popular vote that the president has, the margin is approaching 4 million.
But look for the mantra being from the Kerry campaign, this time, as opposed to last time, every vote will be counted. We're not doing it we're not being poor sports here. We're going to make sure that every vote is counted, no matter how long it takes.
Here's an idea, and tell me if I'm off base with this. Can they take a look at all the provisional ballots before they decide whether they're going to be admitted or not? Check out who voted for who.
Number.
If they see that, okay, even if every single one of these ballots is counted, there's not enough people that actually voted for John Kerry for this to even be a situation. Could we find that out in less than 10 days?
Probably, but again, you'd have to count the entire gross number of provisional ballots. And you've got the absentee ballots, a whole other section. And the other thing to be looking at is this whole idea of the poll watchers. We already have, 2 federal lawsuits in Ohio and the Supreme Court weighing in before the vote yesterday as to the poll watchers. So again, look for the Kerry campaign to find people who say, I either didn't vote or was kept away from voting because I was worried about being harassed, and again, a due process claim that could wend its way to the courts. I think, again, the mantra would be from the Kerry campaign, not that we're poor sports here, but that we are, supporting everyone's right to have to vote and for that vote to be counted. That could wend its way through the courts and take quite a long time.
All right. Great. Thanks for the cheery news.
Good thing you're on staff, Lee.
Short attention span. We want to know right now.
I'm so sorry.
Especially when it's one electoral vote away from knowing who's president this morning.
That's all right. Half past the top of the hour. We still don't know officially who the next president of the United States is. The White House already claiming victory. Mark Rasko is going to be joining us live from the Bush camp, so stick around.
Well, you saw it earlier today. There it was, Andy Card declaring victory for the Bush camp, although the president getting some rest, not making it formal. Joining us right now from the Bush-Cheney campaign is the chairman and former Montana Governor Mark Rasko. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Well, Mark, right now, do you believe this election is the president's?
I have absolutely no question about it. He achieved a huge number of votes in the popular vote. In fact, he received more votes in the popular vote than any president ever has received. And, of course, he has at least, as Andy pointed out, 286 electoral votes. So we have no question but that the president has been successful, and the American people have elected him to another 4 years.
I know Governor Andy Card said that Nevada was in the Bush column. Fox News has not yet declared him the winner there, but very specific that Ohio would wind up in your column, despite the fact that the Kerry people say there could be 250,000 provisional ballots or ballots that haven't been counted yet. Give me your thinking, Governor, in how the president absolutely gets Ohio.
Well, it's just not mathematically possible if you take a look at the facts and the experience that we've had with provisional balloting. First of all, if those 150,000 ballots are there, John Kerry would have to get approximately 94% of those ballots in order to be successful. Secondly, there's some experience from Illinois with provisional balloting. And of course, provisional balloting is provided for someone who is already registered and for a person who's voting in the right precinct, but a mistake was made keeping their name off of the voter rolls. And it's not meant as a process to allow for a re-registration. And at the end of the day, in Illinois, we found that in the primary of 2004, only 17% of those provisional ballots ultimately ended up being counted. In Chicago, it was only 7% of the ballots ended up being counted because, quite frankly, they didn't comply with the law. They weren't properly registered or they didn't vote in the right precinct. So it just is mathematically impossible, it seems to us, that you could find a scenario that would produce a difference of 150,000 votes.
So when are we going to see the president then come out and declare victory?
You know, I think the president is going to try to be as gracious as is humanly possible. I believe that, you know, really what happened last night, still haven't called some states, as you mentioned this morning. Last night, Iowa, Wisconsin, New Mexico, Nevada were still on the board. And as a consequence of that, I think they wanted to take some time to think about it and see the landscape in the morning. Sometimes you're just overcome by the facts, and I think they'll realize that at some point this morning.
Now, Mark, I know you feel very positive with the results now, and after all, almost all precincts are in as we try to figure out Iowa, Wisconsin, Nevada, and New Mexico. But I'm sure you didn't feel that way early in the afternoon on Election Day. Can you compare the early exit poll results to what the reality ended up being? Have you ever seen anything that seemed to be so off?
No, it was a matter that was very disconcerting and I think dispiriting to the media, because they'd like a vehicle to be able to measure what it is that's taking place and convey their impressions to the American people, which they should do. But there were such aberrations with the exit polls that really something's got to be done because they were so completely inaccurate. We started to suspect it early on when we looked at Florida, and we found out that they were predicting that the Hispanic population, in essence, had shrunk in Florida. And we knew it had enlarged. Or the number of female voters in North Carolina, they tabulated to be 63%. We knew that wasn't accurate. So it wasn't long before we started to realize there's something very wrong here with the models that they're using.
And Governor, those exit polls are supposed to be secret. We pay for them so that we know how to explain how people are voting. And yet they were leaked. They were all over the internet, and all of them showed that John Kerry was up 2, 3, 4, 5% in some circumstances. It almost looks like maybe his people leaked the stuff to get some good buzz and maybe keep people from going to the polls in states that were still open.
Well, that's certainly one conclusion that one could draw. You have suggested that as a possibility. I don't know exactly what happened, but I do know that there is such aberration that my great hope is we find a different means or vehicle to convey information to the public, or make certain that we, when we're involved in this process, are very, very careful and thoughtful, because I do think it can have very deleterious impacts upon the electorate.
Yeah, right. Well, Governor, how about if we get rid of exit polling and we just hire the Psychic Friends Network? That would be perhaps cheaper.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be a decision, of course, that our respected journalists across the country will make, I'm certain, on their own.
Governor, let me ask you a quick question about the Ohio situation. Are you guys going to be sending lawyers there as well? How is this going to play out if the Kerry camp continues to say, look, there's 250,000 votes that need to be counted and we're not going to concede?
Well, I think what will happen is is to begin immediately. By Ohio law, it says that you can begin the process immediately. You have to remember there are 88 counties in Ohio, and each one has a board of election board, and as a consequence, they'll be looking at those things. So the people that we have had there helping us on the ground, most of them from Ohio, will be helping in this process too. They've qualified to do that, and the courts have said that that's entirely appropriate. And we'll have people there also to advise from a legal perspective. But it's not entirely clear exactly how this will unfold. I suspect they'll begin the process immediately, and it'll move with as much speed and dispatch as it can. My belief is that John Kerry will take a look at this situation and in the cold, hard light of day conclude that there's just no mathematical way that you can proceed in this fashion and avoid the consequence or the verdict that's already been entered.
Governor, I don't know how you felt. I know you're very good friends with the president, along with having this being chairman of the Bush-Cheney campaign. We understand the president is exhausted. It was exhausted and relieved, and he knew he did his best regardless of the results. Can you add to that in your last conversation in terms of his mindset?
Well, he was very serene, and I think the campaign was something he found exhilarating. It offered an opportunity to connect again with the American people in a very profound way. He very, very much wanted to be able to serve, continue on in the service of the people of this country. He was humbled by the process. He's very excited about bringing the country together and moving on, addressing the issues that impact us domestically, and leading the nation to address terrorism in a way that makes it safe for my children and your children, and we don't have to do something here in this country that we can address now in other places. So I think he was very serene because, as you said, he knew that he had spent himself, he had done his best, he had taken a positive agenda to the American people, and he trusts them. In the end, that really is a unique circumstance, I think, for some political people these days. They find it hard to trust the American people. He doesn't. He was more than comfortable with them making that decision.
Of course, he went to bed, and you're still up.
We thank you very much.
I'm a little bit rummy, I think.
That's the privilege of being the campaign chairman. All right, Governor Mark Roscoe, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Meanwhile, what are they doing up in Boston? Kelly Wright is at John Kerry headquarters right this very moment. Kelly, what's the buzz up there in Beantown?
Interesting you should ask that. I talked to a Northeastern University student who was actually out here last night in the wee hours of the morning around 3 a.m. just when John Edwards came up to talk. And one of the things she told me is that she's from Cuyahoga County, of all places, Ohio, and she's attending school here. But she was very upbeat initially and then became somewhat concerned. And now she's, like so many Kerry supporters, are a bit disappointed this morning, not knowing the fate of their candidate, knowing that he is still contesting this. And he was supposed to speak to people win or lose here last night to about 30,000 supporters. Instead, they sent John Edwards forward to talk to the crowd. He was very concerned, looked very concerned as he came out to talk to everyone. Here's an excerpt of what he had to say to the people.
Thank you. It's been a long night, but we've waited 4 years for this victory. We can wait one more night.
Waiting one more night, that's John Edwards vowing to move forward, not giving a concession speech, to move forward to make sure that every vote counts in Ohio. Ohio state election officials, by the way, say there are only about 140,000 provisional and overseas ballots in that state. And since the president's margin of victory is so close to that number, it is mathematically impossible for Kerry to win Ohio. But the Kerry camp, as I've mentioned, is not conceding. Now, we heard from 2 Republican senators out of Ohio. This is a statement that they have issued. It says, quote, Based on our experience in Ohio politics, we believe that the president's lead in Ohio is clear and that it cannot be surmounted. Senator Kerry should concede defeat and spare the country the turmoil of another drawn-out election. Those statements coming from Senator DeWine and Senator Ivanovich out of Ohio, Republican senators to say the least. As for the Kerry camp, we have not heard anything from them since John Edwards spoke about 3 o'clock this morning. We do know that the crowd is dispersing shortly after that. It was a rainy time for the crowd, and as I mentioned earlier, John Kerry was looking forward to celebrating a victory speech and a victory parade. Perhaps it is indeed rain on this parade here today. We'll continue to wait to hear from the Kerry camp, which we expect to take place sometime around 10 a.m. this morning. Back to my good friends in New York.
All right, Kelly Wright, live in Boston with the very latest from the Kerry camp.
See, if I'm going to make a decision, I want to take a timeout, and I want to roll some commercials in and then come back with the same outfits.
All right, good. And how about on the other side, we talk about how Wall Street is going to react to this morning's cliffhanger. We'll be right back. And what is KB Home? The answer is straight ahead.
And welcome back. It is 15 minutes before the hour. Well, with 100% of precincts reporting, President Bush leads Senator Kerry in Ohio by approximately 136,000 votes. But Ohio's Secretary of State says there could be as many as 175,000 provisional ballots outstanding. Provisional ballots are backups for voters whose names do not appear on voter rolls, but who believe they're eligible to vote. Election workers then determine if each provisional ballot cast is legitimate or not. In 2000, there were 100,000 provisional ballots. Of those, 90% were counted. Ohio will count its provisional ballots in 10 days when overseas absentee ballots are also counted. At that point, Ohio's vote will be officially certified. Now let's go back to Stevie D and Brian. Sorry. Stephen, Kieran,
15
and
more
Brian.
minutes and then it'll be right. Thanks, Lauren. Well, markets around the globe reacting to the still undecided election.
Joining us right now is Fox News business correspondent Dagan McDowell. Good morning to you, Dagan.
Good morning.
First up, what's KB Home?
It's a housing stock.
All right, thanks very much. You and I were just looking on one of the websites. There's KB Home right there, a housing stock. They're doing very well. We were just looking up the futures. The Nasdaq's up 20, which is big. S&P's up about 12, and the Dow Jones is up 93, which means...
Which means even though President Bush has not been declared the clear winner, it looks like investors are betting that he is going to stay in the White House. That's what it seems. You would think it's not certain who really won this election yet, you would think that there would be a sell-off in the market maybe. The market just wants to know who wins this thing. Right. But it looks like they're betting that he stays.
And Dagan, yesterday when the exit polling was showing, which we now know to be wrong, big wins for Kerry in a lot of those swing states. The Dow tanked a little bit.
Yeah, it was up almost 70 points at one point and ended the day down. And clearly investors like President Bush. He's seen as a president who is friendly to business. He had the tax cuts on capital gains, dividends, and income. The market liked that, and the market would like to see the president stay in the White House.
What about the deficit, a huge deficit, though?
That's a huge issue with both of the candidates.
There's the president last night in the private residence upstairs at the White House, surrounded by family and friends.
Now, Dagan, let me bring a scenario when it could be all too likely, and that is Senator Kerry says, I think I'm going to get my lawyers involved. I'm going to fight this every step of the way. I owe it to the American people. How will the markets react?
The markets would not like it at all. The markets would be flat at best, if not down. Wall Street does not want to see another 2000. They do not want to see this drag on.
Why is that bad for the market if there's just some uncertainty in a period where there's no new president anyway because you have an inauguration in late January?
Because the market goes out and takes all the news it can and then factors it into what are stocks worth. And if you have this big uncertain question hanging over the market, the country, the world, then they don't know what stocks are worth. If Kerry could have very different things in terms of policies from President Bush, and the market doesn't know what to do with that if they don't know who wins.
Well, the market in this country opens up in 2 hours and 45 minutes, so it'll be interesting to see what happens, how Wall Street votes. But the European markets have already opened. How have they reacted?
Modestly higher. They're certainly lower than they were when they first opened about 3 a.m. our time, but the Asian markets did quite well in overnight trading. And when it looked like that President Bush was taking a lead, the markets took off. And you saw the Dow futures really take off when some of the networks called Ohio for the president.
To expand a little bit on what Brian asked you about the uncertainty situation, one thing is certain, and that's that John Kerry said he would eliminate the tax cut, repeal a lot of President Bush's tax cuts on the wealthier people, of course, Wall Street, wealthy. So that would be probably one of the key reasons why the markets would go down.
Right. The market does not like the fact that Kerry wanted to repeal some of the tax cuts, but also Congress staying in Republicans' hands, that means that Kerry would not be able to get through a lot of what he wanted to do. So.
Gridlock on Capitol Hill.
Gridlock might be good for the market.
All right, Dane, congratulations on your endurance. You've been up all night.
I'm trying.
Good job.
Red Bull.
Fresh as a daisy. Thanks, Dagan.
Thanks. We could have gotten that sponsorship, Steve. What were you thinking?
Just like that.
Dagan brought to you by Red Bull.
Because I like to take a nap after the program, but nobody's napping today because there's a cliffhanger. We still don't know officially who the next president of the United States is. Could it happen during this program? Stay with us.
One thing we do know, what we do know is that Florida voted great this year. Everything went off without a hitch down there. We're going to talk to Florida Congressman Mark Foley about that next.
Good news is that's not a live shot. They did that already. Those people are home in new outfits or sleeping.
All right, welcome back. We are, of course, scanning the wires, looking at our computers.
Off the laps.
Because it is about 5 minutes till 7 a.m. Eastern time. We still don't have a president this morning, but there's still a lot to talk about. You decided 2004. We're just waiting for the outcome.
Joining us right now from West Palm Beach, Florida, Congressman Mark Foley. Good morning to you, Congressman.
Morning, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing great, and the people of Florida are waking up saying, hey, we're not a laughingstock today. We did it right. You guys had very few problems down there yesterday.
We had an incredible day. We had record turnout. The machines were working. People's votes counted. The president won by 400,000 votes. So it's a great day for Floridians, and we'll look to Ohio to decide this election, and it will be for President Bush.
So you got about 3,000 lawyers down there with nothing to do but enjoy the beach, I guess. They were all ready to go.
Well, they'll be on Karen, they'll be on shuttle planes to Ohio, I'm certain. They'll be wasting their time because we are going to win this election.
Congressman, how would you explain the bigger difference now? You know, we're in the thousands instead of 500 plus. What changed in Florida to give it more decisively to the president?
Well, Brian, first and foremost, we have a new computer system. We have touchscreen in Palm Beach County. Some counties have optical scanners. We had early voting. No Democrat can claim today that they didn't work hard enough, that they didn't have their votes counted, nor did they not have enough resources. They poured every available dollar into Florida through ACORN, through MoveOn.org, through AFL-CIO. A variety of organizations flooded our state for the last 4 months with emphasis on winning this election. They came 400,000 votes short because Republicans were as energized. We had phone banks, door to door, walking shopping malls, street corners. The president crisscrossed the state repeatedly over the last several weeks. I think he was here 45 times since his presidency began. So it was a great ground game led by citizens who really wanted to participate this year.
All right, Congressman, let's go ahead and talk about the houses of Congress. The GOP retains control of the Senate by a couple, picked up 1 or 2, and also in the House. Tell us how that is going to affect whoever is president of the United States.
Well, I think it will lend some cooperation to President Bush with his agenda. We have a lot of issues to tackle. Health care, we have to deal with Iraq, we have to work quickly on getting the economy up and running. I think we've made great progress on all of those fronts. Now we need a level of cooperation. I believe as soon as Mr. Kerry concedes, and I hope it's by noon today, we'll be able to start setting an agenda, working with Democrats to make certain that we find solutions to some of our vexing problems. I'm encouraged. I think races like Renzi in Arizona that were supposed to be on the bubble, he won an outstanding victory. I think the constituents have rewarded many of those members of Congress with solid victories because of the kind of emphasis they put on representing their constituency.
Right.
So I'm excited about the next 4 years, at least the next 2 for me.
Congressman, let's find out, too, about what you feel about Andy Card's comments, essentially saying he's going to give Senator Kerry the respect he deserves to come out and basically concede before the president comes out and declares victory, and it should be at the earliest 10 a.m. on either side. How long do you wait if you're Senator Kerry? How long do you wait if you're the president?
Well, Senator Kerry's bragged about his military record. He should be able to recognize a sinking ship. This thing cannot continue. The country needs finality. From Main Street to Wall Street, we want to see the president enjoy the victory that he has earned. There's no question about it. This was a fiercely contested election. I salute Senator Kerry and Senator Edwards. They ran a valiant campaign, but it's over. The numbers will not bear out a victory in Ohio, and I believe those other states that are on the bubble will trend our direction. But as of, I believe, 10 or 11 o'clock today, you can certainly say the president's going well above 270.
All right. Congressman Mark Foley from Florida, thanks so much for being with us. And as we know, Florida spent $32 million on reforming their voting system. They had those electronic voting machines.
Money well spent.
It could be become a national model for casting ballots.
All right. Well, Kieran, thanks for dropping by for the first 2 hours of our extended version of Fox and Friends.
Being a national model for early morning TV.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll be watching on bated breath to see what happens.
Now, do you know the tradition? You read your way out.
All right, I will. Did all of those polls that we've been showing you over the past few weeks paint an accurate picture? Well, we're going to compare those numbers, the exit pollers, with some egg on their face this morning. We're going to talk all about that. Edie's warming up.
It's a whole omelet.
Ohio, President Bush has a lead of at least 140,000 votes. The Secretary of State's office has informed us that this margin is statistically insurmountable.
Well, that may be and that may not be. The Senators' team says it's not ready to call it quits just yet. And we'll tell you why they're holding out hope at this hour and look at what it's going to take to call the election. That and more as we look at how you decided 2004.
There you see the states still in play, Nevada and New Mexico and Iowa and Wisconsin as well. And good morning, and it's deja vu all over again.
Can you believe it? Deja vote.
There you go. Very good.
Except for we don't have the controversy and anarchy that we felt last year at this time. It really feels as though they're...
Give it time.
Do you really think we're heading that way?
No, actually, I don't.
But after Andy Card made those statements earlier today, I thought he might have turned up the heat on the Kerry campaign to really decide in the next few hours if they are going to fight this thing in provisional ballot land and absentee ballot land or concede.
Well, it's interesting because when you take a look at a lot of the states, they aren't in that margin of error. We aren't seeing, Al Gore won New Mexico by a couple of hundred votes, Wisconsin by a couple of hundred votes. We aren't seeing things that tight this time around. Where Senator Kerry has won, he's won big in most cases. Where President Bush has won, he too has won big. Ohio is the one where the Democrats say that they think that there's enough absentee ballots and provisional ballots that if most of them, the vast majority, went their way, they think they could win. But we're waiting for some really solid numbers before we can call that for well, we called it for the president.
Right.
They're waiting for solid numbers before they actually accept that they've lost it.
No network has thus far declared the president. However, I am about to declare that we now know the next president of Afghanistan will be Hamid Karzai. He officially yesterday was declared the big winner.
Yeah, it
Thank you for breaking that news.
Hey, Steve, it took
I wanted to declare the president during this program.
I think we will.
That took 2.5 weeks, didn't it?
No, I believe we will. I do believe that within the next 2 hours, we will get the opportunity to declare the president on this program because the numbers that everybody is getting indicate something to us, and everybody is just gun shy because of last time to go ahead and make the announcement.
Well, what's the electoral count right now, Edie?
The president has 269 electoral votes at this point. Senator John Kerry has 242, and you know that magic number, 270. Now the races that's still not decided: Wisconsin, Iowa, New Mexico, and Nevada. And we are projecting that the president is the winner in Ohio. And as we mentioned, the senators' people still think that there could be a chance of pulling that out. We have been told that there are not enough provisional ballots there, really, that statistically it would be virtually impossible for the senator to win it. That's why we have projected the president as the winner there. But the senators, folks, have not conceded yet.
That's right. There are some reports there could be 150,000 provisional ballots. The Kerry people say there could be a 250,000. But as Mark Rasko said during the last half hour, statistically, and remember, kids, study your math, and it could pay off the day after election. Kerry would need something like 73% of all the outstanding ballots, and so far Ohio did not break that way. Yeah. But let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of the national numbers right now. Here it is, the President of the United States, and this is the all-important popular vote. The President of the United States leads by about 4 million at 58 million versus 54 million.
Now that is striking because, you know, as close as it was last go round, here we have the president, the same one from 2000, winning not only the popular vote, but by the largest number in history.
Right. But he got more total votes than any other candidate, presidential candidate in our country's history, and that's what was pointed out by Andy Card. So yeah, it was close, but could he actually be on the way to a mandate when you look at the House and Senate races?
And this is a huge victory for the President of the United States. Down in Florida, 52% versus 47. As you can see, the President of the United States won by over 300,000. Meanwhile, in Pennsylvania,
it wasn't even close. I mean, everybody's saying, "Oh, that's going to be close." It wasn't even close. And then you mentioned Pennsylvania. Exactly. Take a look at this. It really wasn't close.
But Pennsylvania, it didn't look like the president was going to get one vote early on. It was such a blowout, and that certainly tightened up. In Florida, the early returns, the exit polls show he was losing big.
And then what about West Virginia? Remember, everybody said, "Oh, West Virginia, all of a sudden in play." Not a chance. It was not even close either.
And that was an early indicator that maybe the exit polls weren't going to tell the story this time.
Brian, do you have anything to say to me about polls today?
I'm not Mr. Poll, but you were the biggest doubter. But exit polls are different in that exit polls have really been, to the election experts, a real gauge on where it was going.
And yesterday, we were getting the information on the exit polls, and through this entire thing, I've said, I think that they were all a bunch of hooey. And if you looked at those exit polls, they didn't work. Whoever was in charge of figuring out what to ask people and how to pick people, and I gave the story about my sister, who just to mess with people. Thanks, Adrian. Kept on saying, "Oh, I'm undecided," and and she said I didn't want them to have extra money left over.
And all those all the exit polls were leaked about midday, and a number of outfits on the internet picked them up and ran with them, and they all showed Kerry ahead in states that he eventually
which could have hurt the senator.
Well, yeah, and the theory is that, according to some, that the Democrats in many ways found out where the exit polls were going to be conducted. They made sure their people showed up at those polling places in particular, so they'd go out, give the answers, therefore give an unbalanced. There's a theory out there that they found out. Therefore, if you know where the exit polls are going to be conducted, you can switch the model.
I don't believe that they would do that simply because it doesn't work. It doesn't work in either's favor. If you're the Bush people, you don't want all the polls out there, being released the day of the election saying he's losing big. Right. And if you're John Kerry, you don't want all the polls saying he's winning big, because then the folks out on the West Coast who are still voting made the same thing, like the Florida Panhandle last go round.
That's right.
Well, it's already decided. I'm not going to bother to go vote.
Right, exactly. Well, the President of the United States went to bed very late last night. He could be up already watching us to see if we're going to declare.
I don't think he's up yet.
He could be.
Without a doubt, he
normally gets up at 5:30 in the
because he goes to bed at 9. This time he had special permission to stay up late.
I got news for you. It's a big day. Let's go to the White House right now. Mike Emanuel. Mike, turn around.
Check the lights.
Yeah, is his light on? Can you tell if he's sleeping in?
Well, Stevie D, Brian, I can tell you the lights were on just about all night. In fact, the motorcade was revving until all hours this morning, until the president finally decided to go get some rest, and the vice president decided he was going to go back to his residence and get some rest. We know the White House Chief of Staff has claimed victory for President Bush and Vice President Cheney. Andrew Card says the Bush-Cheney team is convinced the president has won the popular vote, and the campaign's estimate is the president has 286 electoral votes.
President Bush's decisive margin of victory makes this the first presidential election since 1988 in which the winner received a majority of the popular vote.
Now, as we take a look at the vote in the battleground state of Ohio, there you have it, 51-49 Bush over Kerry. And there you see the numbers, 2.794 million for President Bush, 2.658 million for Senator Kerry. The White House Chief of Staff says the Ohio Secretary of State has told the Bush-Cheney campaign the president's lead is statistically insurmountable. Here now is Andrew Card's take on the overall election results.
This all adds up to a convincing electoral college victory, as well as a strong endorsement of President Bush by his fellow Americans in the popular vote.
Now, the White House Chief of Staff says President Bush has given Senator Kerry the respect, the time to think about his decision, think about what he wants to do. And Andrew Card says that the president will make a statement later today. Back to you guys in New York.
All right, thanks very much. We're just going through the office poll to see how we did. We still don't know, though, the final electoral
We don't.
vote.
We've got what? But you know what?
I don't think anyone knows the final electoral poll.
We don't. But the three of us and John Podhoretz are in the top tier right now.
That's why they let us sit in the light.
But you know what was so interesting? We had some that thought that President Bush would win it with over 300 electoral votes. We had others that thought that Senator Kerry would with over 300 electoral votes. It went right down the middle.
I'm looking at mine. I took Bush for Ohio. There's some, of course, members of the Kerry campaign.
Hasn't been, yeah.
Exactly right.
Conceded.
And Jeff Goldblatt is live in Cleveland with the very latest. Jeffrey.
Steve, no gambling. Come on now. Hey, the Ohio Republicans certainly were not gambling last night, but they were partying, and they were partying early, actually, well before Fox News called Ohio for President Bush at about midnight. That's how confident they were. In fact, some top Republicans rented out a bar in the downtown hours, in downtown, we understand, and actually asked that bar to stay open late. That's just how happy they told us they were. Now, why were they so confident? Well, we got news from some top Republican operatives in the hours before we called Ohio for President Bush, and they said that the statistics were just working in their favor, that there was no way that the models were going to break any other way. And most importantly, in this county where we are, Cuyahoga County, and we have been told by Republicans here in Cleveland that in order to win the state, the GOP knew the president needed to prevent John Kerry from taking Cuyahoga County by more than 250,000 votes. And the reason that is the magic number, we are told, that John Kerry needed to eclipse in order to offset Republican gains downstate in conservative rock-ribbed Republican counties. At the end of the day, or early in the morning in this case, it was no surprise that John Kerry took Cuyahoga County, but he won it by only 218,000 votes, so far below that 250,000 magic number. And yes, there are still provisional ballots and absentee ballots and overseas ballots still uncounted. The Kerry campaign estimates this total to be about 250,000 votes, but the chairman of Ohio's Republican Party and Ohio's Secretary of State, also a Republican, says that total is probably much lower at about the 140,000 mark. And the chairman stresses to us that for Kerry to take Ohio, he'd have to win nearly 100% of those votes, which he says is downright unlikely. Bottom line, election officials here are saying the state comes down to simple math.
If, in fact, the margin of victory for one candidate or the other is greater than the number of provisional ballots, then you can have a reasonable guess who won the election.
And Ohio's two senators, both of whom are Republican, George Voinovich and Mike DeWine, have also called upon John Kerry to concede the state of Ohio, saying it is inconceivable that John Kerry can win this state and that the vote total is insurmountable. That's the latest from here in Cleveland. I'm Jeff Goldblatt. Now back to you.
All right, Jeff, thanks very much. According to the Associated Press, they just crossed something that said that they are going to canvass all of Ohio's 88 counties to figure out exactly how many provisional ballots are out there. As soon as that number comes in, we'll share it with you.
And also the thing we have not discussed at length, but I'm sure we will in the future, and that is the young people's vote. Everyone thought the vote or die, the big push to get the young people out there will be out. Early models say that it is the exact same turnout as 2000.
That would be very
17%.
Mr. Hill said that when he was at the polls that there were a lot of young people there.
And Mr. Hill is?
Mr. Hill is the smartest man in my house.
Your husband.
Good answer. Smartest man we know from the Senate in Georgia. Well, one of the two. Saxby's next.
Georgia Senator Saxby Chambliss is with us from our Atlanta bureau to share his thoughts on the still undecided presidential election. Senator, it's good to have you back with us.
Good morning, Edie.
Well, what are your thoughts after watching last night and what you've seen this morning?
Oh, I think it was a great night for Republicans all across America, and I am just as excited as I can be. You know, there's no way that Ohio is going to change from the Bush column, and I think John Kerry is probably smart to take a look at it, but I think when he does, that since there is no way that this thing will be over early today, hopefully.
All right, Senator, please excuse me. Earlier I referred to you as Saxby. It was a hard break coming up. If I had your whole name, I would have gotten whacked off. So
I realize you don't get much sleep.
Oops, you got that right. So my question is, as we look to these provisional things in Ohio, and I know that's not your home state, but would we even be talking about Ohio if there wasn't a Florida in 2000?
Oh, probably not. And I think the good news here is we're not talking about 537 votes as we did in 2000. We're looking at, gee, what, 150,000 or so. But I think you're right. The process changed in 2000, and we're seeing an overspill of that this year.
Let me ask you about the changing face of the Senate, because there are going to be a lot of new people coming in with you. Probably one of the most hardest fought races was the one up in South Dakota, where the House Minority Leader Tom Daschle, who is the face of the opposition in the Senate, was defeated. What do you think that this signals? I mean, when you look at how the voting played out in the Senate races, does that signal a mandate for the president or not?
I think what it says, Edie, is that the American people are tired of this divisiveness and this obstructionism that we've been seeing by the Democrats in the Senate. And you look at the fact that Tom Daschle was the leader of the minority party, which means he's been leading the obstructionism. It came home to haunt him, and I know John Thune campaigned very hard. He's such a class guy, and Tom Daschle's a nice man, but the philosophy that he was operating under is not what the majority of South Dakotans and I really think Americans want to see happening in the United States Senate.
Also, Senator, yesterday in 11 states approved the constitutional amendments in their states to ban same-sex marriage. That's good news for the President of the United States, who had said he'd like to see a constitutional amendment doing just that. It was a sweep. Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't at all. I think a majority of Americans have shown their outrage at the fact that we're even considering this issue. I mean, gee whiz, if you'd told me 10 years ago when I first ran for Congress that one day I'd be voting on a definition of what is marriage, I told you were crazy. And I mean, it's such a staple in our life that what marriage is all about, and I'm not surprised at all that it was overwhelming.
We have Iowa, New Mexico, Nevada, and Wisconsin still out there that have not been called. What does your gut tell you on those states?
I think the fact that they haven't been called is pretty good indication that President Bush is in great shape, and he's going to get his fair share of those electoral votes. And
why? Why do you think, because it hasn't been called, he's in good shape?
Well, because we know he's been leading in a couple of those states. He was leading in Nevada. He was leading in New Mexico. It's been up and down in Wisconsin. So I think the president is certainly positioned well.
Gotcha.
Senator Chambliss, thank you very much for joining us.
Always good to be with you guys.
All right, thank you. All right, 20 minutes after the top of the hour on this Wednesday morning, did Fred and Mort make the right predictions? We'll get an election reaction from the Beltway boys next.
And welcome back. It's 23 after the hour. Continuing our election coverage, Republicans remain in control of the Senate. For now, the balance of power looks like 53 Republicans, 44 Democrats, and 1 independent. But there are 2 Senate races still too close to call in Florida and Alaska. In Florida, Republican Mel Martinez claimed victory earlier today. He is ahead with 99% of the vote in, but Democrat Betty Castor refused to concede. She is preparing to challenge the results. And in Alaska, the votes are still being counted with 98% of the vote in. Republican Lisa Murkowski is leading over Democrat Tony Knowles. Meanwhile, Republican John Thune won the Senate race in South Dakota against incumbent Democrat Tom Daschle. John Thune served 3 terms in Congress, and that's a big win for Tom Thune, that is. Now let's go back to Steve and Edie.
All right, and Brian,
and
too.
Brian, too.
And the Beltway boys.
They were
made
here
their
24 hours
predictions.
ago.
Yep. Well, looking back on it, any surprises?
Well, the big surprise,
yeah.
surprise was the exit poll.
Exactly.
We got,
exactly.
you know, early yesterday afternoon, and it looked like a John Kerry sweep. He was winning everywhere, according to the exit poll. And the only thing that made me a little dubious of it was, for some reason in the exit poll, it was about 59% of the electorate was women. And they don't use, I know women vote, and then the other part was the numbers didn't jive nationally with the state numbers.
Maybe the exit pollers just were talking to girls. Maybe that's what it was all about.
It could be.
Here's what I'll remember about it. I thought we were going to have to go to tape programming at 9 o'clock because when I walked into this building at 7, it seemed fatalistic, where the exit polls have showed an overwhelming John Kerry victory. What did you guys think to yourself when you were looking at the same data, but yet your gut told you something different?
No. Our gut didn't begin to tell us something until about, well, mine didn't, until about 9 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock, when states started to come in at different from their exit polls. And when we did call it on Fox last night that this wasn't adding up and that we should watch it, that this wasn't coming through. But I mean, there was an avalanche of gossip around the country about all day long yesterday, and if you watch Brit's show at 6 o'clock, the panel, it was all done on the basis that we thought that Kerry had won. So it was, we weren't saying that Kerry had won, but boy, we sure thought it. We
should explain to viewers that here in the TV industry, while you wanted a really nice, quick, clean election, it helps us if it's this long, drawn-out, emotional process, lots of turmoil, and so when it looks like there's a very early victor, and it looked like it was going to be John Kerry very early on, you think, well, no one's going to watch past 7 o'clock.
You are going to feed a conspiracy theory now
Everybody knows
that this was all a media plot to keep people interested all night long.
Well, you know what? But that's why. So you come in and you're hoping for this great race, and what we were told last night was it's not going to be a race at all.
Well, what about the conspiracy theory that maybe some Kerry people leaked that exit poll data to Drudge? And
they couldn't.
No, everybody leaks it. So
it was leaking all over the place.
If it's a conspiracy, it involves everybody.
But it may have hurt John Kerry on the West Coast.
Oh, I don't think so. Why would that have hurt him?
Because people are, same thing as the Florida Panhandle last go round.
He carried California, he carried Oregon, and he carried Washington. He didn't lose anything as a result of this.
Normally it works the other way, that if you think your candidate's going to win, then you do vote, and if you think your candidate's going to lose, you just throw up your hands and go.
Go ahead. Here's Andy Card 45 minutes ago, an hour and a half ago. We are convinced President Bush has won re-election with 286 electoral votes and a margin of 3.5 million popular votes. It's the first time since 1988 the winner got the majority of the popular vote, more votes than anybody else in this nation's history running for president. So what is the next move? How do you see it, Mort?
Well, I think the Kerry people are going to consider their options. I mean, they put it over to today. They haven't declared victory. They haven't declared defeat. They're going to look at how far behind are they in Ohio, and how many provisional ballots there are. If it's mathematically impossible for them, and I think it is, to overcome the margin, and I think there may be 200,000 provisional ballots out there that uncounted, but Bush is, 130,000 ahead. That would require the vast majority of these provisional ballots to be 1 valid and 2 Kerry ballots, and that's probably not the case. So I would guess I would hope that there would be a concession today, if that's mathematically the way it is.
Well, there should be, because Bush won. And, if you lost, you usually give a concession speech. And it's absolutely clear that Bush won. And I think
when we look at our
Fox and others will officially declare it this morning. Clearly, I mean, we stopped last night at 269, but 100% of the vote is in New Mexico,
because we wanted
Nevada,
to carry everybody
and
over.
Iowa.
That way they had to wake up and turn on their TV again. It is a conspiracy.
Tell the audience.
Yeah, I think that
Bush won amazingly.
Yeah, they're waiting. They're waiting.
A huge triumph for Bush when Bush is reelected. Republicans gain seats in the House of Representatives and gain seats in the Senate.
That's the first time in 40 years
it's really remarkable.
That's happened. And and look, Bush won the popular vote. He won a majority of the popular vote, which is really important. We don't have a plurality president. We have.
So what about all those selected, not elected bumper stickers?
They're now available on eBay. Hey, guys, when they look back at the history of this election, what role will Michael Moore, Fahrenheit 9/11, the MoveOn.org people be relegated to?
Well, Michael Moore is irrelevant, but MoveOn.org did play a big role in jacking up the turnout. They got a lot more Democratic voters there, and really forced the Bush people to do even more than they had planned to do about getting out their own vote and registering people themselves.
This was stupendous turnout, and it was stupendous organization.
117 million is what you guys have.
I forget what the popular vote adds up to, but it was a stupendous organizational
right now.
or a stupendous organizational effort on both sides. But you got to say that the Republicans, Karl Rove, Ken Mehlman, and all their subordinates really organized this country well.
And the kids didn't respond. They got the concerts. They didn't vote according to the stats.
What, you thought Bruce Springsteen was going to swing this? You know what was the key in Ohio?
What?
Kurt Schilling. Campaign with Bush.
Well, yeah, it would have been better in New Hampshire.
Arnold Schwarzenegger did, too.
It sounds like that bloody sock worked. All right, Fred and Mort, thanks very much. Catch the Beltway Boys each and every Saturday at 6 p.m. right here on the Fox News Channel. We promise they'll take a nap before then.
Coming up, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani.
Wow, really?
Yeah, she wouldn't lie to you.
All right, 28 minutes before the top of the hour, the Bush-Cheney campaign has declared victory. Here at Fox News, we still have not called the presidential race. As you can see, Bush has 269 in the electoral votes, and Kerry has 242. Joining us with reaction is former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Ohio still up in the air, according to the Kerry campaign, because they say there could be a couple 100,000 provisional ballots, and a lot of them are there for Mr. Kerry.
In the words of Yogi Berra, it's over. This is over. You're out. I mean, for the good of the country, you got to know when to concede. This is not 500 votes or 1,000 votes. This is 136,000 votes. I conceded an election for 42,000 votes, where I had claims that there may have been fraud. Right. But you say to yourself, for the good of the city, I'm going to do that. Well, for the good of the country, I mean, there's got to come a time when somebody puts the country first and not just themselves. This is absurd.
But we don't want the same thing that we had last time, where people can make an argument, oh, well, that state was stolen or something. You want to know.
There's not single evidence of fraud. Nobody's claiming fraud. Right. The president is ahead by at least 136,000 votes. There's something like no more than 146,000 provisional ballots. Provisional ballots are ballots that are challenged. A large percentage of them turn out to be done by people who aren't registered, aren't legally there. Each one of them is challenged. And then he'd have to win every single one of them. There's no place in Ohio where he won every 100% of the vote. So this is absurd. I've been through a lot of tough elections, both as a candidate, sometimes as a lawyer. This is silly.
So they're just waiting to see, it's one more state that the president needs.
And this is not a situation where there's any question about the popular vote. President has, I think, won the largest popular vote of anyone ever running for president. Mm-hmm. He achieved what Bill Clinton never achieved, a majority. Bill Clinton never won a majority. And he's brought along, and Bill Clinton lost his Senate and House to us. We've held it now for 10 years, and the president has expanded our grip on the Senate and the House. This is a big victory.
Right
58 million.
And Mr. Mayor, right now, I saw you out early on where it looked as though the Kerry was going to be the next president of the United States, and you were doing the networks, you were going out, you were talking. Since that time, things totally reversed, where you think it's done, the president has won re-election. Have you talked back to the campaign in Washington?
Yeah, a number of times last night. And from the very, very beginning, the campaign said, Ken Mehlman, coming from Karl Rove, et cetera, there's something very, very wrong with these exit polls. Both the campaign from Washington and some of the operatives that we had worked with in Ohio, in Florida, in a number of other states. Even the states that the president won, those early states like Virginia and North Carolina and South Carolina, we were wondering why you weren't all calling them. These are going to be big wins for the president, because you had exit polls that were half to 1/3 of the margin the president actually won by. Somebody's really got to go back and take a look at how the exit polls were done here, because if there's any accountability, I mean, this was a disaster. I mean, it looked like a big Kerry win. Mm-hmm. It turns out to be a big Bush win. I mean, look at popular vote. This is a big win. This is a 2.5 million, 3 million vote win. 51%. We haven't had a president at 51% since the president's dad. Right. I don't think a Democrat's gotten a majority since Lyndon Johnson. I'm pretty sure that's right. I don't think Jimmy Carter ever got a majority.
Is it too early to be talking about 4 years from now?
Sure. Way too early.
Oh, come on.
It is not. You said you were going to wait
John Kerry hasn't even conceded yet.
You said you were going to wait until this election
and
was
I hope
done.
it's going to happen today. And I put aside partisan politics and Democrat, Republican. I know how it feels to be on the other side. And look, we all had to live through the exit polls yesterday. We felt yesterday to some degree that we were on the other side. In this situation, I'm absolutely convinced, in a situation reversed, George W. Bush would concede for the good of the country. America's at war. He would not do this to the country.
But over the last couple of weeks, you've been out on the trail, and some have suggested 4 years from now you would make a great candidate for President of the United States. You've seen what it's like out there. You've had a lot of rubber chicken dinners. Do you see yourself comfortable in doing that?
I have no idea.
Let me ask this way. Is there anything that you experienced while you were out campaigning that you intensely disliked?
Baby kissing?
Oh, I love baby kissing.
All right,
babies, you hold them up, you kiss them. That's part of the nicest part of it. Schnitzel eating is great fun. I love campaigning. Part of it comes from the fact that I enjoy it. I really enjoy it.
How strange is it not to be the man? You're helping somebody else get elected, and you did it so long and so hard.
I had such empathy for the president yesterday. I mean, and my wife Judith and I mean, we got a chance to travel with the president. And if you spend any time with the president, you become very personally close to him. This is a really, really good man. And his wife is a wonderful woman. And the idea that he was facing the possibility that he wasn't going to be our president, I was kind of heartbroken when you listen to those polls. But Tony and Ken Melman and others kept telling me they're not correct. And they take me back to the experiences that we had when we were campaigning in Ohio, when we were in Florida all day Monday. And the sense was, I mean, we also knew, and for this, Karl Rove and Ken Melman and the whole crew get great credit. They put together the single best field operation I've ever seen in a presidential campaign. It was nothing short of brilliant.
Well, thank you very much for stopping by. We know you're very busy. You've got some babies to kiss and whatnot. Mayor Rudy
Schnitzel to eat.
Go ahead, just to walk off the stage. It's okay, because we've got to go someplace else.
Okay.
All right? Thank you very much.
Mayor, good to have you back with us again.
Good job.
Well,
I'll walk you off.
Halloween.
We're going, okay, guys? Do you need anything?
I need some tickets fixed.
I need
Can you do that? Yankee tickets I can get you, not fixed.
Listen, if you had any question about where Senator Frist's loyalties lie, you didn't after Halloween, because I went by his shrubbery, and on it he had carved in Bush Cheney 04 and little stars all over it. And the senator is joining us right now, the senator from Tennessee, majority leader as well. That was quite an impressive shrub you had there.
Edie, that's right. It's about 8 feet high and about 40 feet long, and it's been out there for about 2.5 months, and it did a pretty good job because he did mighty well last night.
So was that a shrub or was that a bush?
That was a bush. That was the whole bush is.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about the Senate. Tom Daschle, your cross the aisle counterpart, is out of work this morning.
Well, you know, he is. And first of all, let me say Tom, who has served as Democratic leader for 10 years, has done a admirable job, an effective advocate for the other side of the aisle, I might add, but has been very effective here in the United States Senate. But clearly, if you look at the people of South Dakota, they believe in President Bush. They believe in his vision, whether it's the war on terror or education and health care or the judicial nominees he sends over. And Senator Daschle was inconsistent, I should add, with those beliefs and that vision. And John Thune, an effective candidate, believes in President Bush, believes in that vision, and South Dakotans spoke.
Senator, as you watched the race unfold, though, it's obvious that a number of Americans weren't quite happy with the way the president was handling things here at home. And so I'm wondering, now that you have even more senators coming in from the Republican side, what will be the first thing that you think is important to try to get through the Senate?
Well, Edie, I disagree a little bit, because if you look at issues like health care, which probably is one of the #1 domestic issues we have in this country, the soaring cost of health care, the fact the uninsured are too high, President Bush did what Democrats and others had talked for 10, 15 years, and that is to modernize Medicare, to strengthen and improve it, to offer prescription drugs in an affordable way to 40 million seniors. That was a first step, and what we'll see in a second administration is a second step to reach out. That was a bipartisan bill. It took 60 people to pass that bill. It helps 40 million people. You'll see more of the same.
Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in Ohio. Election offices are going to be opening up in the next hour or so across the state, and all of the 88 counties. They're going to try to figure out how many of these provisional and absentee ballots there are out there, because the Kerry campaign says there's a possibility that in those ballots they could actually win. Statistically, it's an uphill battle for Senator Kerry. Your thoughts this morning on the fact that Fox News and a number of other networks have declared Ohio in the Bush category, and yet Kerry has not yet conceded?
Well, it's clearly in the Bush category, and some have declared it already, and others will. I am absolutely certain. I think what we've seen is a whole flurry of lawyers who have come into Ohio who are advising Senator Kerry and Senator Edwards, probably as a reflex or a reaction to 4 years ago. Don't concede too early. Don't concede too early. In truth, mathematically, statistically, there is absolutely no way that they can win Ohio. And as Andy Card said just a couple hours ago now, well, we'll give them some time to reflect on that, but then it's going to be time to move on so that we can come together, so that we can govern, so that the president, who is rightfully president of the United States and reelected as president of the United States, can continue to lead in the war on terror, homeland security, prescription drugs, health care, education.
What's the harm, though, in waiting an extra day if it takes everybody's concerns and gives them peace of mind?
It's clearly no problem. That's why Andy Card, I think, that's why the president, many people felt should just have gone ahead, since it's so obvious. It is apparent to everybody that he is the victor in Ohio. He has the Electoral College won, and he has the highest number of popular votes in the history of the country. He's reelected president of the United States. You know, it's probably graceful that he didn't come out and go ahead and do a speech last night. Although I think over the course of the morning it's going to become so apparent that at least I would encourage him to at least come on out and you know, call it what it is, and that is a victory.
All right, Senator Bill Frist, who not only is a doctor but apparently has the greenest thumb in the U.S. Senate. We thank you, Senator, for joining us today.
Good to see you. Thank you. Good to be with you.
Thank you. Ohio under the microscope. Could those provisional ballots make a difference? We'll talk to an election law expert. Kind of had an inkling early on that Ohio might be this year's Florida. Joining us from Columbus is Ohio Congressman Rob Portman, the Bush-Cheney Communications Chair for the state of Ohio, and it's good to have you with us.
Good morning, Edie. Thanks for having me on.
Well, a lot of folks are wondering what exactly is going on in Ohio. A number of networks have called the state for President Bush. The senator has not conceded the state because I believe the feeling is that there may be enough provisional and absentee ballots to swing it his way. What are the latest numbers you're hearing?
Well, Edie, first of all, it's a great night for the president in Ohio. He exceeded all expectations. He did very well. He had a margin of about 139,000 votes, and it looks like the provisional ballots are about 140,000. Many of these provisional ballots will not be valid based on the experience of other states. You know, Illinois had a provisional balloting provision in place under the new HAVA provisions, the Help American Vote Act, and I think there were 17% of valid ballots. So not all of those 140,000 will be valid, and of course not 100% of them will go for John Kerry. So mathematically, it's impossible for me to see how this could make a difference in the outcome. So I believe President Bush has won Ohio.
But are you bothered at all, though, that the senator wants to just wait and I guess let it play out a little longer?
Well, I think after, I hope, a couple hours of sleep anyway, people will wake up and kind of be able to look at the math and understand that it's important for us to move on as a country. This was a hard-fought election. It was an election where there were high emotions on both sides, and it's time to bring the country together and move on. So I would hope when they look at the math and see the fact that we won by 139,000 votes in Ohio, which was a nice victory, and the fact that there aren't enough provisional ballots to make up that difference, that we can indeed declare Ohio. And with that, I think we've got close to 278 electoral, or 286 actually electoral votes when you add the other states together. So I would hope that at that point the senator would make a statement, and then we can have the president talk about unifying our country and moving ahead. What
about the issues that were also on the Ohio ballot, bringing folks out? You had the marriage amendment that was on there. What happened?
Issue 1 passed in Ohio, and that probably helped in terms of turnout. We think we had near record turnouts in Ohio. Certainly in the area where I live, the lines were long, and It was fantastic. Both young and old showed up to the polls, and it was a great day for democracy, too. It was a great participation, both by volunteers in the campaign process, and then on Election Day yesterday, we had fantastic turnouts all across the state.
I know that the 527 organizations really blanketed Ohio with voter registration drives and that ilk. They had hoped for a very high young voter turnout. What do you think happened? Did you get any sort of early guesstimates about whether or not that was successful or whether we saw the same level?
Well, I think young voters did not turn out to the extent that people had hoped, including myself. I think it would be great if more of our young people participated in the process. But the real story in Ohio, as far as I'm concerned, Edie, is the fact that the volunteers made the difference. You're right, there was a lot of activity in Ohio by paid volunteers, by these so-called 527 groups. These are the outside groups that came into Ohio and paid people, you know, $8 an hour or $10 an hour, I guess, to register voters and to get voters to the polls. That didn't work as well as the old-time volunteers. And the Bush campaign had more volunteers than ever, and they were unprecedented in terms of their activity. This year, Edie, we made 3.5 million phone calls to get people to the polls. Back in 2000, our volunteer network made about 600,000 calls.
Okay.
So I think that was really the difference, was the volunteers.
Representative Rob Portman, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Edie. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Did the polls get it right? We'll talk to the independent pollster, Frank Luntz, next.
7 minutes before the top of the hour, 4 states are still too close to call in this presidential race. Is there a big surprise in the works? And so far, what we know, what's the big surprise?
Well, the big surprise so far that the President of the United States wound up with Ohio, according to Fox News. But you know what? All we had to do was talk to pollster Frank Luntz, the founder of the Luntz Research Company, because yesterday on this program, you predicted the president would take Ohio. Congratulations. How come you're so smart?
Maybe it's because I'm also so tired. You could feel Ohio, you could see it. Look, Ohio's a Republican state, and it should have been in Bush's column. But that it would end up being the swing state, that was a little bit tougher. I got to tell you, as much as predicting Ohio felt good, the exit polling, what those guys did last night was absolutely awful. The Kerry people, and I spoke to some of them before the evening was out, they really thought that they had won the election based on the polling numbers. Sure. The exit polling got it wrong in Florida. They got it wrong in Ohio. They got it wrong in more states.
How did they get it wrong?
They were off in some cases by 6, 8, 9, 10%.
But what did they do to mess up?
I think that their models were wrong. I don't think they anticipated the turnout surge. And most importantly, there was a huge group of people who voted before Election Day. You cannot poll people and expect them, and this is one of the dirty secrets of polling. If I poll the American people and ask them what percentage of you voted in this election, 90% will say yes. Right. Because we don't want to admit that we're not doing our civic duty. Right. So adding that into the exit polling numbers and assuming that people who said that they voted actually did, that's where they got it wrong.
But when they were talking to the people who said they had already voted, you know, they said, oh, I voted this way or that way, and they came up with, I mean, that factored into their projections. So why would someone, you know, say I voted for one guy and decide to vote for the other? Because
the modeling process. First off, you've got people who come and vote after the exit pollsters do what they do, and I believe that there was a surge at the end. I believe that business people who went early could not vote. You know, there are places here, and New York's not even in the target vote list. There are places that had an hour-long wait at 7 a.m. Business people go, they're not going to wait an hour in the morning, so they come back and vote in the evening. In Ohio, for example, some of the polls were kept open much later.
Till 3:55 a.m.
Because people were standing in line, and those weren't Kerry voters, those were Bush people, and just not picked up.
So, Frank, you weren't a believer. Some thought that, okay, these numbers will continue, and if you don't believe what you were seeing, were you thinking fraud?
It's not an issue of fraud. It's an issue of incompetence. And people like me who are taught to trust these, because after all, it is exit polling. It's not just something on the television, telephone. I trusted it. And it was even more off this time than it was in 2000. The networks, including this one, and I know I give Fox a lot of credit, your network trashed those numbers very early on because your correspondents were smart enough and had been at the Fred Barnes and Mort Kondraki and people like that. They went to these states and they knew that there was something wrong with these numbers. They deserve credit, and viewers were smart to be watching them. But the exit pollsters, this is it. Truly, it's got to change because you make projections based on this information, and the Kerry people right now cannot understand. That's why he didn't concede. They cannot understand how the exit polling would be so wrong.
Does John Kerry have a case to hold out this
right now? For
Yes.
Ohio, no, he does not. And the truth is, John Kerry was the one who talked about this time that he was going to be a uniter. It's clear that George Bush won the popular vote. It looks like it'll be by 3%. So what John Kerry, and by a majority as well. So what John Kerry is saying now is, even though the minority should not have ruled before, this time the minority should rule. I think John Kerry...
But it's electoral. If he deserves, if he wins, you know,
But
if
he
he's
doesn't deserve it. Rudy explained it better than I could, but I will tell you that we are a divided country today. That is correct. And both John Kerry and George Bush together have an opportunity to start to heal the wounds. I hope for the sake of this country that both of them calmly, collectively, and quickly put an end and say this election is over, because you know what? The election is over.
Yeah.
And so's the interview. The smartest guy in polling, Frank Luntz, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Great call yesterday on Ohio.
Thank you.
All right, we're taking a quick time out, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Illinois.
Yeah, Barack Obama rose to stardom at the Democratic National Convention, and what a speech last night when he won a seat in the U.S. Senate. The Illinois
wife
Senator,
didn't do too bad
his
either.
wife was fantastic. She should be running also. The Illinois Senator-elect will talk about his victory in our next hour.
President Bush has won the state of Ohio.
Tonight, we are keeping our word, and we will fight for every vote. You deserve no less.
It's a war of words in the Buckeye State. Republicans claim victory. Democrats say not so fast. And suddenly, Ohio's starting to feel a bit like Florida 4 years ago. More on that and all the other major races from coast to coast as we report what you decided 2004.
Take a look. There it is, the popular vote in the United States of America, and the president of the United States is leading by about 3%. It is the largest turnout in American history, with approaching 120 million people going to vote over the last couple of weeks.
But just so you know, the feeling from the White House is, although the vote is not officially over, the feeling is from the White House that it is. President Bush, according to Andy Card, his chief of staff, says he has decided to show Senator Kerry respect and give him more time to reflect on the results of this election before he wakes up, comes out, and says, "It's mine."
And you know what you know what this means?
What?
This means this morning George Soros is looking for a monastery to move into.
What do you
because
mean?
remember
That's what he
last
said.
week.
He would spend as much money as it took to get George Bush out of office, and if what he spent didn't do that, he was going to move into a monastery.
Really? Hasn't Alec Baldwin taught him anything?
You know what, George? He could move into a money stary.
Here's the gist of what's happened. The race has not been called. We are right on the edge of it. We're waiting for the final tallies because no one wants to get it wrong this time. The final tallies from these last 4 states, Iowa, New Mexico, Nevada, and Wisconsin. All of those, though, are leaning towards the president. Ohio, a number of networks have called that already for the president. Others are holding out. The argument there is that there are a number of provisional ballots and absentee ballots. And the Senator Kerry and his group believe that they might be able to overcome the 135,000 ballot excess that the president has. Everyone we have talked to said that it is statistically impossible, but they have not conceded that race yet.
All right, so let's talk about some of the other battleground states. First up, West Virginia. There for a little while, it looked like it could go according to some of the polls.
The pollsters, I told you, bunk.
But that, okay, that's the U.S. Number. In West Virginia, the President of the United States retains that in his column.
Wasn't even close.
Meanwhile,
there
it is right there. He winds
56 to 43%, not even close.
But early on, before they closed too close to, or right after it closed too close to call, right? That's what they said, and then it comes out.
based on
exit polling.
The polls and the exit polling. And again,
this was fishy.
Pennsylvania, everybody said, this is going to be a tough one. The president doing surprisingly well there, but again, John Kerry winning it by a significant number of votes.
And out west in New Mexico, we had the governor of that state on yesterday, and he said it was going to be a close call.
It is.
And we don't have that graphic to show you, but I'll tell you this right now, it is too close to call. Fox News has not yet put that in either man's categories because there are, once again, some provisional ballots, maybe as many as 40,000 out there that they need to count and count quickly.
And see if they should count.
And they return at 7 a.m. this morning. The election officials went home last night, and then they'll be coming back in this morning. But you're seeing the New Mexico numbers scrolling on our screen, and so you can take a look at that. But it is certainly leaning in one direction right now, but there has been nothing official announced.
One thing is clear, the turnout was tremendous. I think over 117 million we can confirm. 1 in 10 of the voters were first-time voters. That's also good news. But surprising news is the kids did not come out. The same statistic, it's 70% of the kids eligible. I think it's up to the age of 22, 18 to 22. Only 17% came out, same as 2000.
That would be a very interesting thing because I know that a lot of people were expecting that whole, the rock get out the vote and vote or die and all those other campaigns that they had had out there had registered a lot of people. If they didn't vote, that says something.
And so when it comes down to voter irregularities, they were scattered. There weren't that many. There were a number of states that reported that MoveOn.org, some of their workers had been harassing some of the voters. MoveOn.org responded, look, we're being victimized here because it seems like the other side is just ganging up on us. We're not doing anything wrong. Down in Florida, a couple of machines didn't work in Miami and St. Petersburg. In Volusia County, the optical scan ballot reader broke down. They had to rescan them. Also in Boynton Beach, Florida, 40 votes were erased after a power failure. And the only real vandalism that we know of was in the state of Wisconsin, where Bush Cheney had rented apparently between 18 and 30 vans to get out the vote. They went to get in the vans yesterday morning. All the tires were slashed. So they had to get out the tire iron and change the tires.
But probably the good news for everybody as you wake up this morning is that it went pretty well. We had concerns about all these problems with voter irregularities, false registrations, long lines, all that. It went pretty well, and while we haven't called the race just yet, it's looking like it is going to be happening any moment.
Meanwhile, are they about to pop the champagne, non-alcoholic, at the White House? Mike Emanuel is live on the North Lawn with that. Hello, Michael.
Steve, Edie, Brian, good morning once again. If you listen to the surrogates, those who worked very hard on behalf of President Bush and Vice President Cheney, they're convinced it's a done deal. White House Chief of Staff Andy Card came out early this morning and claimed victory on behalf of President Bush and Vice President Cheney. Here's what the White House Chief of Staff had to say.
We are convinced that President Bush has won re-election with at least 286 electoral college votes. And he also had a margin of more than 3.5 million popular votes.
The White House Chief of Staff says President Bush will wait until later in the day to make a statement, quote, to give Senator Kerry the respect of more time to reflect on the results of the election. The last time we saw the president, he was watching election returns in the White House residence with the First Lady, his daughters, his parents, and others. Mr. Bush appeared relaxed and confident. Earlier on Fox and Friends, the chairman of the Bush-Cheney campaign talked about how President Bush is doing after a hard-fought bid for re-election.
The campaign was something he found exhilarating. It offered an opportunity to connect again with the American people in a very profound way. He very, very much wanted to be able to continue on in the service of the people of this country. He was humbled by the process. He's very excited about bringing the country together.
So no victory speech so far from President Bush, but those close to him are clearly prepared to claim victory, and we expect to hear from the president a little later today. Back to you guys in New York.
All right, Michael. Thank you.
So what do you think? Around 10 o'clock is the earliest. You figure the president went to bed around 2 o'clock.
He wakes up at 5:30. Nobody sleeps in that late.
Yeah, but he always goes to bed at 9. That's why he gets up at 5:30 and hops on the treadmill.
That. Even on weekends when you try to sleep in, it's very difficult.
Well, I thought he got up early to watch Fox and Friends First Edition.
Yes, he does, Steve. We'll use him in our ads.
The question is, what is John Kerry going to do? Fox News Channel, a number of networks have called the state of Ohio for the president, and yet the Kerry campaign has not conceded that. Kelly Wright is at the John Kerry headquarters in Boston. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Edie, Brian, and Steve. Let me see if I can set the atmosphere here in terms of what's going on. It is a very windy post-election day here in Boston, and of course John Kerry and John Edwards had been hoping that the winds of change would sail them into victory in the White House, but it seems, it's apparent that the winds have been taken out of their sails this morning as they wait to see what they're going to do about gaining a victory to get to the White House. The mood here throughout the election day, as you can imagine, was very upbeat and optimistic, as we saw yesterday. A very lighthearted John Kerry. Thousands of supporters gathered here in Copley Square, some singing and dancing in the rain to entertainers like Sheryl Crow. The Kerry camp went into election day thinking they would gain a victory from new registrants and a large voter turnout. The crowd was eager to hear John Kerry speak to them, win or lose. Well, instead of speaking to them, he sent out his running mate, John Edwards, who came to the podium after it appeared that Ohio, the Buckeye State, was beginning to buck the trend of what the Kerry team had been hoping for. Here's what John Edwards said last night.
John and I are so proud of all of you who are here with us and all of you across the country who have stood with us in this campaign. John Kerry and I made a promise to the American people that in this election, every vote would count and every vote would be counted.
Senator Edwards there at 3:00 a.m. this morning, vowing to the crowd that they would make sure that every vote would count. Ohio State election officials say there are only about 143,000 provisional ballots in Ohio, and since the president's margin of victory is so close to that number, it is mathematically impossible for Kerry to win there. But the Kerry camp is not conceding anything, and Ohio Republican Senators Mike DeWine and George Vonovich issued the following statement about the election day drama unfolding in the Buckeye State. They said, based on our experience in Ohio politics, we believe that the president's lead in Ohio is clear and that it cannot be surmounted. Senator Kerry should concede defeat and spare the country the turmoil of another drawn-out election. We will have to wait and see. We understand the Kerry camp is meeting sometime within the hour and will determine what they're going to do. Kerry, by the way, yesterday said after voting that he would not challenge anything. We'll have to see if he holds true to that word today. Back down to you guys in New York.
All right, Kelly, thanks very much. We should also mention the third big name in the race, since we did Bush and Kerry as well. Ralph Nader, his support nationally in the single digits. He did not wind up with one single electoral vote.
Now, meanwhile, Senator Kerry told this to friends right after he personally voted about his mindset going in. Before he knew anything, he said, not winning is not the worst thing that's ever happened to him. After coming back from Vietnam alive, everything else is gravy. And that's
true. It's true.
Is true. And he was very melancholy. He says nothing prepares you for walking into the voting booth and seeing your name under presidential candidate.
Yeah, how cool is that?
He didn't give up his seat, though, did he?
No,
he did not quit his day job.
He still keeps his seat. Edwards lost his seat.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, but John Kerry would still be, if all this holds out and it
looks like it will
continues. Yeah. Senator Kerry still has the day job.
And one of the other icons of Washington politics over the last couple of years, Tom Daschle, is going to be looking for something to do because he was defeated at the hands of John Thune. The people of South Dakota voted overwhelmingly for the President of the United States. And just take a look, by about the same margin.
How close is that? We have such incredible viewership in South Dakota. And last week, when we invited both Mr. Thune and Mr. Daschle on our program, only Mr. Thune came on. Mr. Daschle said he didn't have time to do it, and I think that was a real mistake.
And who will be the new minority leader? Odds are Harry Reid.
All right.
From Nevada, right?
He will be doing it. He'll be the face of the party, evidently. I mean, if you think about it, he'll be the face of the Democratic Party.
So they'll have an election and figure that out. In the meantime, the people of Illinois have spoken, and they want Barack Obama to serve them in the U.S. Senate.
Huge win there.
He will be joining us live from Illinois when Fox and Friends, the post-game show, continues in 2 minutes.
And welcome back. It's about quarter past the hour. Actually, it's about 16 minutes past the hour. Republicans remain in control of the Senate. For now, the balance of power looks like 53 Republicans, 44 Democrats, and 1 independent. Alaska is still counting votes, and Florida is too close to call. 99% of the votes are in for the Senate race in Florida, with no winner declared so far. But Republican Mel Martinez claimed victory earlier today. Democrat Betty Castor refused to concede and says she is preparing to challenge the results. And in Alaska, the votes are still being counted, with 98% of the vote in. Republican Lisa Murkowski is leading over Democrat Tony Knowles. And Republican John Thune won the South Dakota Senate race against Democratic incumbent Minority Leader Tom Daschle. And now let's go back to Steve, Edie, and Brian at Fox and Friends.
Thank you very much.
Well, last night's other big story, the U.S. Senate races, Edie.
And Barack Obama won the Senate seat in Illinois, vacated by Republican Peter Fitzgerald by a huge amount. The senator-elect joins us live from Chicago. And it is good to have you with us this morning.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I'll tell you what, your wife is a great public speaker. We were watching her as she was introducing you last night, and it was very clear that she is just so incredibly proud of you. What do you plan to do right before, from now until when you are officially sent to the Senate?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is take my wife out on a date because I not only do I miss her, but you're right, she could easily beat me in an election, and I want to keep her happy so that she doesn't take me on. Really what we want to do is set up a strong constituent service office, hire up staff, spend time listening not only to voters who voted for me, but also those who didn't vote for me, and then start charting out an agenda for how I can work effectively in the minority party in Washington.
Senator, no doubt about it, you have rock star status in the political world. To use that towards making your Illinois more powerful for legislation, you have to understand it. How do you explain your popularity?
Well, I think that there have been a convergence of forces. There's no doubt that in the general election we got some good breaks. Speaking of the Democratic National Convention gave me a very rare platform for a politician, 18 minutes of unfiltered airtime directly before a national audience. But I think probably the most important thing for me has been to set a tone that says we're trying to solve common sense, practical problems without undue partisanship. I'm somebody who has some strong principles, but I don't presume that I've got a monopoly on wisdom, and I try to work with people of all political stripes. And I think that people appreciate that sort of practical mindedness at a time when we have a tendency to let partisan politics overwhelm our common sense.
Well, while most people knew, it was a given you were going to win this seat pretty early on, I'm sure that you were looking at those exit polls and everything else for your party right along with everybody. Right. Were you surprised by some of the election exit polls and then the results?
Well, there was obviously a huge mismatch there, and I think that teaches us all a lesson in terms of how effective some of these exit polls are.
Yeah.
But I think that what's important as we move forward, regardless of what happens at the presidential level, and I'd give the same advice to John Kerry or President Bush, I think it's really important at this stage to recognize that this is a 51-49 country or a 50-50 country, and that whoever's in power has to show a certain humility and a recognition that they've only convinced half the people. For us to move together, we need a much higher percentage of folks moving in the same direction. I would give that same advice to Democrats. I think if we do end up being in the minority position, we shouldn't obsess simply with regaining power. We should think about solving problems for working families across the country.
Senator, do you look for Senator Kerry to fight, continue to fight, especially in Ohio with the provisional ballots? And he is down 145,000 votes, and according to most math, it's going to be tough for even those provisional ballots, even at 100%, to go his way. What do you look for him to do now?
Well, yeah, I think it's appropriate at this stage for Senator Kerry to look at this very carefully before he makes a final decision. Keep in mind that he owes his position now to the incredible amount of work and the resources that people have put in over the last couple of years, and he owes it to his supporters to make sure that the numbers are right. But I don't anticipate this dragging on for weeks the way it happened in the year 2000. I think that if it becomes indisputable that, in fact, President Bush has a winning margin, then I think that Senator Kerry will be very gracious in defeat. But I think taking a day or two to make sure that the numbers are correct and that he's explored all the issues involved, I think is appropriate.
When you wake up this morning, even though for a long time people have been saying that you were going to handily win this seat, do you still sort of marvel at where you are this morning?
Well, certainly this has been a strange and wonderful journey for us. I mean, to think about where we began, a state senator with little money and little organization and an unusual name. For me to be in a position now where I can represent a great state like Illinois and have a voice in some of the major issues that we face as a nation is something that I'm extraordinarily honored by and will work extremely hard to live up to.
Well, Senator-elect Obama, congratulations.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, well, our next guest predicted a dead heat. With us from Charlottesville, Virginia, is the director of the University of Virginia's Center for Politics, Professor Larry Sabato. Good morning to you, Professor.
Is it morning?
Well, you know what? It is, and we still don't know. It's a cliffhanger. According to Mary Beth Cahill, I was just on johnkerry.com. She says that there could be 250,000 votes out there in Ohio that are uncounted. There we're looking at the popular vote nationwide. With the provisional votes in Ohio, she says they could put Kerry over the top and beat Bush, and that would be bad news for the president. What do you make of Mr. Kerry's position this morning?
I think it's about 2 degrees away from death, which is more or less the way I feel. But look, I expect cooler heads to prevail, and yes, it is a dead heat in the Electoral College in some senses. But let's also focus on the popular vote. A lot of us made a big deal, and I include myself in that number, of Al Gore carrying the popular vote by 537,000 in 2000, in the 2000 election. It was a significant number. Well, if that was significant, then surely a 4 million vote lead, a 51% majority in the popular vote is very, very significant. Now think about this. Suppose there was some technical, legal way for that army of lawyers that the Democrats assembled, the Republicans had their army too, to go into court and seize Ohio from George Bush. Would you answer me one question? How could John Kerry govern for 4 years? It's not possible, having lost the popular vote by 4 million. So I expect sooner or later cooler heads to prevail. I think they made a good decision last night. And I think the president made a good decision not to go and claim victory.
Right.
Let people calm down, let people think about their options, let people look at the votes today. Frankly, I don't think this will go very far, but I'm always willing to be surprised.
But even if it switches,
can I add one thing?
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing. The crystal ball at the University of Virginia Center for Politics got 99.8% of the Senate races, House races, and gubernatorial races correct. I want to point that out.
You're doing better than your football team.
A lot is being made, though,
of
Ohio, and even if Ohio were to shift, that still does not put the senator over the top. So you know, a lot of focus and attention on it this morning, but it still doesn't do the trick for him. I want you to just give us a feel for exactly what this means, because we're waking up this morning, and you started on part of it. We have a president who's gotten the popular vote by a large majority. We have a president who has gotten more than 50% of the vote for the first time in a long time. We have
1988
an increase,
was the last time.
A significant increase in Senate seats and an increase in House seats. sort of give us a synopsis of what that really states about the state of America right now.
All right, well, you have to separate them. The truth is, and you know this because I did it on your show, I predicted that the Republicans would have either 54 or 55 Senate seats. That's exactly what they're going to end up with. Why was I so sure about that, predicting a dead heat in the Electoral College? Because the competitive races by chance were in the Bush-red states, and people felt strongly about their presidential choice. They went in there and they voted for George Bush, and they stayed Republican in the whole column, all the way to the bottom. That's why so many Republican senators were picked up in the South, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, which I think will go to the Republican, Louisiana, the first Republican senator since Reconstruction, Oklahoma, come on, and Alaska's going Republican too.
You know, something you need to have your students working on, Dr. Sabato, is what went wrong in the election of 2004 with regard to these exit polls. Because middle of the afternoon yesterday, if you were watching TV, Democrats had big grins and Republicans were dour because all of the exit polls showed Kerry way up. In the final analysis, a lot of those exit polls were off as many as 10%.
Well, frankly, Steve, A, I'm glad you brought it up, and B, that's the first assignment for your son Pete once he comes to the University of Virginia.
All right, all you got to do is get him in with those good grades of his.
Oh, he'll get in, no problem. But look, listen, this is a serious matter. This is not something to fool around with, and these people who ran that exit poll are pretty much the same people who screwed up the exit poll in 2000. And this had better not be glossed over by the networks. For one thing, I think the networks, including Fox, ought to get their money back from them. Yeah. But they nearly affected this election. Here's how. Every analyst in America, myself included, all day long yesterday thought not only was John Kerry winning, he was winning every battleground state in a landslide. They had Pennsylvania going to him by 19 percentage points. It's a disgrace, and they affected the commentary all day long. Look, all of us, we like to pretend we know what's going to happen, and so we drop hints so people know we're on the inside. We know what's happening. That can affect people. It can make people more enthusiastic if their candidate's winning. It can depress people and depress turnout if their candidate's losing. Those people who ran the exit poll have a lot to answer for. I sure hope that you and the other networks are going to make them answer for it.
We'll see what we can do, but I don't think we've ever seen you quite as steamed, Dr. Sabato.
Well, I've been up all night. That's part of it.
All right.
You know, I tell you, if I have one more cup of coffee, I'm going to go into orbit.
I understand.
And now, exactly, where can we find that 99.8 percentage point correct tally?
We've kept all our predictions right on the crystal ball. Haven't changed a thing. We're very proud of it. All of them. All of them.
So go to centerforpolitics.org/crystal ball.
That's right. No, it's /crystal ball. You got to get the slash right.
That's right. All right.
Slash, like politics.
Larry, thank you very much for joining us during this election season.
I'm punchy, and I've enjoyed being with you the whole season. Thanks a lot.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
Coming up, our special You Decide 2004 coverage continues. A fiery debate between two of our favorite guests, Ann Coulter and Bob Beckel.
Let's put them in boxing gloves. Well, we've all gathered around the laptop because
this is important.
The Republican Secretary of State in Ohio has released the total number of provisional ballots in 78 of Ohio's 88 counties, and right now they show 135,000. Remember, the Kerry campaign said there could be as many as 250,000. This number, about 100,000, 120,000 less than that, but we don't know how many are outstanding in those remaining 10 counties.
Because of the gap. Because of the gap. The president is leading Senator Kerry there by about 140,000 votes. And so if you've got 135,000, even adding in the 10 extra counties, you aren't going to, put in that many. And so you would have to, the senator would have to virtually win every single would have to win every single one of those, and then a lot of other ones that they would have to find to take the state of Ohio. We have already called the state for the president. The Kerry campaign has not conceded, but I think based on the numbers, we can expect that pretty soon.
But Vladimir Putin also had something to say about the elections. He's commenting on. He's made it pretty clear that the president's a friend of his, and he thought that it would be a bad signal to terrorists if the president wasn't reelected.
Yeah, he was quoted as saying on Wednesday, a victory for George W. Bush in the hotly contested U.S. presidential race would mean the United States had not allowed itself to be cowed by terrorists. The quote is, "If Bush wins, then I can only feel joy that the American people did not allow itself to be intimidated and made the most sensible decision," according to Interfax.
Do you think Jacques Chirac's waking up with the Mail-Ox morning?
Absolutely. I think he's moving into the monastery with George Soros.
I think he passed that in his escargot.
Here's the big headline: Florida didn't blow it.
No, it didn't. Orlando Salinas is live in West Palm Beach. We still don't know the outcome officially of the Senate race down there between Martinez and Castor, but Florida went pretty well.
They did, Edie. They really did. Look, as far as Florida is concerned anyway, there was indeed no election meltdown. The touchscreen voting machines that were the source of a lot of controversy, no meltdown there either. And a lot of political experts are saying this morning, look, the reason this didn't happen this time was because President Bush won easily by some 300,000 plus votes. Want to show you some video of the folks who made all this happen. Apparently yesterday, they were standing in line voting all throughout the state of Florida, all 67 counties. The polls from the moment they opened busy. Across the state, as many as 10 million Floridians were expected to go ahead and cast ballots. In Miami-Dade and Broward counties, both heavily Democrat strongholds. Some complaints about voting machine problems, complaints about long lines in Miami-Dade, Broward, and in Palm Beach County. Senator Kerry beat out President Bush in those three counties, but in that all-important I-4 corridor we've been hearing about, from Tampa, St. Pete to Daytona Beach, the majority of those 700,000 so undecided voters, it looks like a good chunk of those undecided voters went, for the most part, for President Bush. Indeed. Now, there were some other problems that we want to talk about. Apparently, there were some reports at some polling sites that when folks from both sides, Kerry supporters and Bush supporters, went to that touchscreen machine, tried to push it, they ended up pushing their candidate, but they got the other one. In some cases, they went in there, pushed the button, and they got only Spanish text. Officials say that was corrected shortly. It didn't take a whole lot of time for that to happen. Also, we can tell you this much. Absentee ballots in Palm Beach County, where we are at right now. Butterfly ballot, the home to that one of 2,000. The new wrinkle seemed to be these 100,000 plus absentee ballots. As many as 70,000, as we understand, still have to be counted. They will be. Now, in the hot race you were alluding to earlier, Edie, filling the U.S. Senate seat left vacant by retiring Senator Bob Graham, Democrat Betty Castor appears right now to be behind by just 1 point, maybe, behind Republican Mel Martinez. Castor, in the closing days, campaigned with Senator Kerry, and early this morning, Castor wasn't ready to concede.
And we understand that there are about 250,000 votes that have not yet been counted. I believe that it is premature for anyone to declare victory in this race until every vote is counted.
Now, Republican Mel Martinez, who also campaigned up to the last minute with President Bush, was upbeat, and he flat out said that he was indeed ready to work. Come on back out live. We've been speaking with a political professor, Dr. Robert Watson, and he says, you know what the real story is here? All of these young voters who promised they would step up to the plate and vote, they left everybody waiting right up there at the altar. Back to you.
All right, Orlando Salinas down in West Palm Beach with the very latest. Now we turn to the President of the United States. We understand.
Listen, it's 8:35, 8:37. Mike can start throwing rocks at the window and get the president out of bed.
I have a report, Mike. Tell me if you can back this up, that the president went to bed at 5:30. Is that correct?
Yes, Brian, and as you well know, that is well beyond his standard bedtime.
Hey, Mike, despite what Edie said, do not throw rocks at the windows at the White House.
Yeah, I don't think Secret Service would like that very much.
Yeah.
Well, good morning, guys.
When are you expecting to see the president?
You know, that's an excellent question, Edie. We know that he's expected to make a statement a little later today. It's not clear whether it'll be this morning or perhaps later this afternoon. Andy Card, the White House Chief of Staff, told us very early this morning that the president wanted to give Senator Kerry the respect to give him enough time to consider the election results and consider what he wanted to do. Now, the White House Chief of Staff is convinced that the president has won re-election with the popular vote, and the campaign's estimate, the Bush-Cheney campaign's estimate, is that President Bush won 286 electoral votes.
President Bush's decisive margin of victory makes this the first presidential election since 1988 in which the winner received a majority of the popular vote.
Now, on the situation in Ohio, there are the numbers on the screen. The White House Chief of Staff says the Ohio Secretary of State has told the Bush-Cheney campaign the president's lead is statistically insurmountable. In other words, a lead that cannot be reversed when provisional ballots are all counted. Historically, a Republican has not won the White House without winning the Buckeye State. Here now is Andrew Card's take on the results of this election nationally.
This all adds up to a convincing electoral college victory, as well as a strong endorsement of President Bush by his fellow Americans in the popular vote.
So the White House Chief of Staff says that the president has given Senator Kerry a chance to look over the numbers, consider what he wants to do, give him some respect to, and give him some time to think about what he wants to say. And we expect we will hear from the president later in the day. Back to you guys in New York.
All right, Mike Emanuel, thank you very much. You know, ever since 1936, that predictor of the Redskins before the big election, this is the year that streak was broken. The same year that the curse of the Bambino was broken.
But remember, the touchdown that was ruled ineligible because of the
Clinton Portis goes the distance,
that's
called
right.
back by a mysterious
Called
penalty.
back, and the judges later came back and they said we made the wrong call.
And you know where that?
It should have counted as a touchdown. Therefore, the Redskins should have won.
Look at that. And you know where those referees were from?
Where?
Ohio. I'm making that part up.
You did, but it really is a great story.
Thank you very much. We got 20 more minutes on
Put
Fox
it on
and
the
Friends.
internet.
I'm gonna.
Stay with us. Bob Beckel and Ann Coulter very shortly.
And welcome back. It's about 18 minutes before the hour, continuing our election night and into morning coverage. In the end, it all comes down to Ohio. President Bush leads Senator Kerry in the Buckeye State by approximately 136,000 votes. Ohio's Secretary of State has just released provisional vote numbers for 78 of Ohio's 88 counties. They show a total of more than 135,000 provisional ballots. Provisional ballots are backups for voters whose names do not appear on voter rolls, but who believe they're eligible to vote. Election workers then determine if each provisional ballot cast is legitimate or not. Ohio will count its provisional ballots in 10 days when overseas absentee ballots are also counted. At that point, Ohio's vote will be certified. And now let's go back to Brian and Edie.
Thank you very much. Was floating in floating.
That's what you want to be, floating in Florida.
So late. Floating in Florida. Voting in Florida a success.
I think so. Who better to ask than Florida's Secretary of State, Glenda Hood? She
was probably up late, too.
Absolutely. Joining us now from Tallahassee. All right, Ms. Secretary of State, how'd it go?
It went great. It was a great success with all the election reforms we've put in place, with the great work of our supervisors of elections, with the well-trained poll workers, and with a very motivated voting public. Florida can declare success as far as their election yesterday.
Do you have any major, contested areas where you have lawsuits being filed?
We have one of our constitutional amendments that thus far falls within the threshold for a machine recount. We won't know for sure until we get the unofficial results in by noon tomorrow. And then, of course, the Senate race is very close, and there are still absentees being counted. As of noon tomorrow, with those unofficial results, we'll know for sure whether there's any machine recount on those.
And we're going to ask everybody who isn't official on their take on this, but the early exit polls had Senator Kerry winning big. I mean, early exit polls winning big in Florida. That's not the way it seems to have ended up. How do you explain the exit polls?
Well, you know, I don't get involved in all of the politics and the campaigns, but I know that people were very motivated to go and exercise their right and privilege to vote. We saw that. We saw overwhelming numbers of people choosing early voting. We saw overwhelming requests for absentee ballots, and our turnout was terrific.
What was it in terms of people who voted early? About what percentage do you guess did that?
From the numbers we've gotten from almost all of our counties reporting, it was well over 20% as far as people voting early or requesting an absentee ballot.
And then what about the turnout in the areas where you had problems last in 2000 in the 2000 election? Did you see increased turnout there? Did you see specifically people turning out in the areas where they had huge registration increases?
We don't, again, have the exact numbers. We won't have them till tomorrow at noon when the unofficial results are in from all the counties as far as what the exact turnout was. But I will tell you, it was very high. We see over 75% in many of our counties. We did see 1.5 million new registered voters in the state of Florida. We now are at 10.3 million registered voters in the state of Florida. I don't know how many of those actually went to the polls. But again, people were very motivated. People went to the polls. They exercised their right to vote.
Bloated filmmaker Michael Moore evidently had dozens of cameras all over Florida checking out all the voting registration places. Any reports there of him hassling people?
I didn't hear any reports of that. Everything went very smoothly at the polls. You know, few little bumps in the road that we always have during an election cycle, usually fall in the category of human error. But I didn't hear anything major reported by any of our supervisors of elections, so it went very smoothly.
What about those touch tone or the touch screen things that you used, the optical scan machines, all those? Did you have any major problems with any of them?
No, we do use touchscreen technology as well as OptiScan in Florida. 15 of our counties have touchscreen technology. We've had that in place since 2002, and once again, no problems. Everything ran very well, as it did in all the OptiScan counties as well.
All right, so I guess there's some more progress to make, but Secretary of State, so far so good in 2004, but you're still going to look to improve, correct?
We always are looking for ways to have the very best election process, and we'll continue to evaluate. For example, we're going to have more early voting sites. We're going to have to be more flexible on where they are in the future because so many people took advantage of that. But I'm very pleased to say that with everyone's hard work and with a very motivated voting public, Florida had a successful election on November 2nd.
Glenda Hood, Florida Secretary of State, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Overcoming the controversy and 4 hurricanes.
Well, that's one job I wouldn't want.
Coming up next, what about this? Getting between Ann Coulter and Bob Beckel the day after the election. Have you ever done that before? Have you ever had that experience? Is it on your resume?
No.
You want to try it?
Okay, yeah.
Next.
They're going to square off.
It's a day after the election. We still don't officially have a winner. It is a cliffhanger. Waiting to find out exactly whether or not John Kerry, that is to say, is going to concede later on today. In D.C. right now, Bob Beckel, Democratic strategist and Fox News contributor / man crying in his beer. And here in our studio is Ann Coulter, conservative, columnist, and author of How to Talk to a Liberal If You Must. Bob, let's start things off with you. Are you ready for your concession speech?
No, I just have to say this, that now George Bush and Ann Coulter, who's my friend, are the gifts that keep on giving. Now I have something to attack for the next 4 years. But you know, I've got to give the Republicans credit. I went down and saw that operation in Florida that the Democrats had in their 527 groups act and all that.
Yeah.
To beat that, they had to have a remarkable organization, the Republicans. I give them a lot of credit.
Madam Coulter.
Yes, I mean, that's why I think this is nonsense. The cliffhanger business, the Democrats did throw
everything they have at this. We got, you know, Bruce Springsteen, Kabbalah, slashing tires of the get out the vote Bush voters, and still they can, and the lying exit polls. I mean, I think that is the biggest story of this election. The outrage of these exit polls that were completely cockamamie. They had Kerry 18 points ahead in Pennsylvania, demonstrably untrue. Everybody knew about them, and I don't know why. I think I would be less inclined to vote for my candidate if I knew he was going to win.
Sure.
But that is not the way exit polls are interpreted. People vote for the winner. It always helps the person they say is ahead. And all day, everyone thought Kerry absolutely had this because of absolutely incorrect exit polls. And I think that needs to be looked into. How about a little competition among the exit polls?
Because we are a nation, Bob, of bandwagon jumper honors. And if you looked at Drudge yesterday around 11 or 12, there it was. Kerry up all over the place. Probably, you know, put a damper on things.
Can you imagine what political reporters in this country would do if it wasn't for polls? I mean, they don't know anything about politics. So, I mean, everybody does it. You know, it's always a who's ahead, who's, you know, what's the favorability. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years, and there's a lot of detail there. These exit polls, you know, most of them are not off this much, but it didn't pick up a lot of things that were going on, both turnout and this pre-voting. But let me just say one thing about Ohio, and I think it's important. After 2000, my side felt very wounded and robbed. Now, I know you argue with that, but I don't see why for 2 days it doesn't, or 2 or 3 days, why not let them count the provisional ballots, just so if it doesn't work out, and it probably won't, just to be able to say it was done.
So you don't think you don't think you should concede today, then?
No, not at all. I think these people's votes ought to be counted if they can be counted, and then nobody's got an argument.
And Coulter does.
Of course. Ann always has an argument.
I mean, for one thing, to go back to the 2000 election, which you mentioned, I think we can all be very happy that Bush won a stunning popular vote victory. In fact, he won a larger popular vote victory than Ronald Reagan ever won. And this is with this enormous MTV turnout. But I think when the provisional ballots, we just got the numbers on the provisional ballots, there are fewer provisional ballots than Bush's margin of victory in Ohio. And that's not even including the military ballots. I mean, yeah, okay, we'll count the ballots. That will be done. If 100% of the military ballots and the provisional ballots are all valid and are all for Kerry, maybe he could retract the concession speech.
You know,
but I just don't think this is good for the Democrats, showing what good sports you are once again.
And it's far be it for me to attack your political wisdom, although I would be happy to. You are also, as I said, the gift that keeps on giving for me. Keep writing those books. It's great. But let me tell you, if that's true, if the margin is bigger than the number of provisional ballots, then you don't have to count them. But I'm just saying, if there is an issue, why let it simmer? Look, I'm going to be against George Bush for the next 4 years. Somebody said to me this morning, aren't you going to rally around the president? And I go, but why should I rally around the president? I don't agree with him. I don't agree with him. It's a democracy. I got a right not to agree with the guy.
Yes. Hey, real briefly, before both of you leave, exit question, Ann Coulter, Tom Daschle, out of work.
Oh, yeah, no, that was one of the most heartening moments of the campaign last night. And also, I think the fact that the South is 100% Republican now.
And Bob Beckel on Tom Daschle?
I think it's actually sad. The guy's done a lot of good work for the country, and he's been a public servant. But it's really nice to have Jim Bunning and that other guy from Nebraska in here. Now we've got St. Elizabeth's psychiatric wing working in the Senate. And, you know, Prozac sales are going to just go crazy over there.
You know, if I can say one more thing about the Daschle race.
Try to work in a pharmaceutical reference, would you?
I will not work in a pharmaceutical reference, but what's especially great about Thune winning, forget Daschle losing, though I like that, is that Thune really was cheated in the last election. I mean, there was a lot of monkey business with the votes on the Indian reservations, and Thune, unlike John Kerry right now, by the way, was very gentlemanly, and even though he had a totally legitimate case to contest the election, said, no, I'm not going to. I'm not going to put the state through it.
Can I just say one thing to you?
5 seconds.
Congratulations, and we'll be back.
Thank you very much. The Beckelnator, Bob Beckel and Ann Coulter, we thank you both. All right, stick around. More of our special post-game show coming up in 2 minutes.
Sad news for us, bad news. Sad news for us, good news for America.
What's that?
We have to go, but John Scott has got the keys to the network.
Well, listen, join us tomorrow. We'll have the very latest on what's going on with the currently undecided presidential race, plus Donald Trump.
Wow. The news continues now with John Scott.
President Bush has won the state of Ohio.
Tonight, we are keeping our word, and we will fight for every vote. You deserve no less.
Good morning. 9 o'clock straight up in the east, 6 a.m. in the west. I'm John Scott, and this is Fox News Live. If you're just waking up wondering who our president will be for the next 4 years, we don't officially know just yet. You just heard the Chief of Staff, Andrew Card, President Bush's Chief of Staff, claiming victory on behalf of the president. He says that they are convinced President Bush has won re-election. They base that on the fact that the president's campaign appears to have taken Ohio. The Secretary of State there says that it would be mathematically impossible for John Kerry to overcome the president's lead in the ballots as counted there. The Democratic campaign is sinking its hopes on the provisional ballots that have been cast in Ohio. But again, the Republicans think they have a victory. The Kerry campaign is not making any concessions as yet. Vice presidential candidate John Edwards says they will fight for every vote. The undeclared states so far, New Mexico, Nevada, Iowa, and Wisconsin. Those states have not declared yet which candidate will take their electoral votes. It could be later today, perhaps even after that, before we know. But once again, Chief of Staff Andrew Card says President Bush has secured 4 more years as Commander-in-Chief. A lot of glee in Republican circles. Democrats not happy this morning, not believing what they are seeing. Mike Emanuel is at the White House this morning. He has a live report for us. Mike, any movement there?
No, John, the president and vice president were up until very early this morning, kind of watching the results, trying to figure out if the president was going to go over to make a statement to supporters gathered at the Reagan building here in Washington. But it was White House Chief of Staff Andy Card who went over to the Reagan building to claim victory on behalf of the president and vice president early this morning.
We are convinced that President Bush has won re-election with at least 286 electoral college votes. And he also had a margin of more than 3.5 million popular votes.
The White House Chief of Staff says President Bush will wait until later in the day to make a statement, quote, to give Senator Kerry the respect of more time to reflect on the results of this election. Last time we saw the president, he was watching election returns in the White House residence with the First Lady, his daughters, and extended family. Mr. Bush said to reporters that in the room at that time, quote, I believe I will win. Thank you very much. Today on Fox and Friends, the chairman of the Bush-Cheney re-election effort talked about how President Bush is doing after a long, grueling campaign.
The campaign was something he found exhilarating. It offered an opportunity to connect again with the American people in a very profound way. He very, very much wanted to be able to continue on in the service of the people of this country. He was humbled by the process. He's very excited about bringing the country together.
So no victory speech so far from President Bush, but it is clear his aides and those around him think he has won re-election, and we expect to hear from the president sometime later in the day. John?
Mike, it would seem that the president is waiting for some kind of a concession speech from Senator Kerry before he actually makes a victory speech. Is that the sense of it that you get?
Well, that's pretty much the tradition where you allow your opponent to concede, to call you and to say, hey, congratulations on winning the race, and to address his or her supporters to say, it was a great fight, but, let's unite behind the winner of this race. So apparently the president and his aides want to give Senator Kerry a chance to do that if that is what he wants to do. And if he doesn't do that, then we'll have to wait and see what the president decides to do. But we're being told by the Chief of Staff that the president will speak sometime later today.
Mike Emanuel, thanks very much. And just this note, we have been told by the Kerry campaign that they will not say anything until at least 10 a.m. Eastern time. That's a little less than an hour from now. Doesn't mean that they will come out at the stroke of 10 and say something, but there will be no pronouncement from them until at least that time. So the Democrats are not yet ready to throw in the towel. Senator Kerry is sending his running mate John Edwards out in Boston to say they'll fight for every vote. Kelly Wright's live with the Kerry campaign in Boston this morning. Kelly.
John, good morning to you. Just as you said, there's been no concession speech. We don't even know if there will be one. We do anticipate we'll be listening to some sort of a speech from the Kerry camp later today, but we just don't know at this particular point in time. John Kerry had been hoping that the winds of change would sweep him into the White House, but apparently this morning the winds have been taking out of his sails in terms of gaining a clear victory. The mood here throughout Election Day was upbeat and optimistic. Thousands of supporters gathered in Copley Square, some singing and dancing in the rain to entertainers like Sheryl Crow. The Kerry camp went into Election Day thinking they would gain a victory from new registrants and a large voter turnout. The crowd was eager to hear John Kerry speak to them, win or lose. Instead, when President Bush began to show signs of winning and the Buckeye state of Ohio began to buck the trends, running mate John Edwards came out to address the crowd shortly before 3 a.m. to thank the diehard supporters and to challenge Ohio.
John and I are so proud of all of you who are here with us and all of you across the country who have stood with us in this campaign. John Kerry and I made a promise to the American people that in this election, every vote would count and every vote would be counted.
And with that, Senator Edwards vowed to make sure that every vote would be counted. Ohio state election officials say there are only 143,000 provisional and overseas ballots in Ohio that hang in the balance. Ohio Secretary of State Ken Blackwell says the number could be as high as 175,000. Some analysts say the president's lead is insurmountable. Ohio Republican Senators Mike DeWine and George Voinovich issued the following statement about the Election Day drama unfolding in the state. They stated, based on our experience in Ohio politics, we believe that the president's lead in Ohio is clear and that it cannot be surmounted. Senator Kerry should concede defeat and spare the country the turmoil of another drawn-out election. Now, quickly, let me point out that yesterday, on the heels of John Kerry casting his ballot at the Massachusetts State House in his neighborhood of Beacon Hill, he came out jubilant and feeling very good about the power of voting and went on to say to reporters that he wouldn't like to see a challenged election. He would like to see a clear victory for either candidate. We can only hope that perhaps the Kerry people are conferring with each other right now, trying to determine what they will do. It's unclear at this point if John Kerry, based on what's happening in Ohio, will come out and challenge the results there. Back to you, John.
All right, Kelly Wright reporting live. Thank you. About 135,000 provisional ballots in Ohio stand between President Bush and a second term. That number comes from the Republican Secretary of State Ken Blackwell. Right now, President Bush is ahead in the Buckeye state. John Kerry, however, has not conceded there. So how long is the count likely to go on? Let's check in with Jeff Goldblatt. He is live in Cleveland this morning. Jeff.
John, here's how things break down this morning. You have different numbers obviously out there, but the number that is important as of this morning, unofficially, President Bush with a lead over John Kerry of about 135,000 votes. Still yet to be counted are your provisional ballots and your overseas military ballots, which tend to trend towards the GOP. All told, we're not talking about a big number here, but obviously it is a number of great consequence. On the high side, you have the Kerry campaign saying there are about 250,000 votes still out there. On the low side, you have Ohio's Republican Secretary of State Ken Blackwell saying there are about 135,000 provisional ballots still yet to be counted. And then we've heard a number somewhere in the middle from Ohio's Republican chairman here, the chairman of Ohio's Republican Party, Bob Bennett, who tells Fox News that that number might be around 140,000 still uncounted provisional ballots. Now, keep in mind with provisional ballots, not all of them at the end of the day are going to be counted because some of them are going to be struck down, that those people will have been proven to be illegitimate, that they voted in the wrong place. But whatever the number, Republican leaders in the state are telling us that the president's lead is nearly insurmountable, that John Kerry would need to capture a percentage of the outstanding vote that breaks from your traditional models. Bottom line, election officials here are saying the state comes down to simple math.
If, in fact, the margin of victory for one candidate or the other is greater than the number of provisional ballots, then you can have a reasonable guess who won the election.
Under Ohio law, the state generally takes 11 days to make the election and the count official. The question is, will the nation need to wait that long? Now, a top Democratic attorney with the Democratic Party in Ohio tells Fox this morning that state party leaders in the Democratic Party are not very optimistic about John Kerry's chances. And he told us that we're not talking about a margin of victory here that's equivalent to Florida. In other words, we're not talking about a number that's in the hundreds. This is in the thousands, obviously. And we're live in Cleveland. I'm Jeff Goldblatt. Now back to you.
All right, Jeff, thanks very much. No matter your party affiliation, here's some good news. Voter turnout in this election could set a new record. It looks like more than 120 million Americans cast their ballots. That's about 60% of all eligible voters. Slightly more than 54% of voters cast ballots in 2000, back when President Bush defeated Al Gore in the Electoral College. Some estimates say the turnout could be the highest in more than 40 years, when 2/3 of eligible voters came out to vote for either JFK or Richard Nixon. A nonpartisan study suggests at least 6 states and the District of Columbia set new highs in voter turnout this time. Those are Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. Senate Republicans are smiling this morning after tightening their grip on the upper house of Congress. The GOP picked up at least 2 seats for a total of 53. 2 races are still up in the air, Alaska and Florida. Democrat Barack Obama took a previously Republican seat in Illinois. Colorado Democrat Ken Salazar also took a previously GOP seat. But Republicans won open Democratic seats in Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Louisiana. One of the biggest victories of the night for the GOP, unseating Senate Minority Leader Tom Daschle. Former South Dakota Congressman John Thune becomes the first person to defeat a party leader in the Senate in 52 years. Thune defeated Senate Minority Leader Tom Daschle in a race that cost $26 million and came down to about 6,000 votes. Daschle was first elected to the Senate in 1986. He is scheduled to make a statement a little later this hour. All right, so we are waiting and hoping to hear something from either the White House or perhaps the Kerry campaign in Boston. We don't know when that might come. It could be today. It could be later this week. It could be next week. But we are all over election 2004. You've decided. We'll report the results coming up on Fox News Live. We've been telling you for months that it would all come down to Ohio in all probability, and in fact it did. There are a look at the numbers there. Senator Kerry with just over 2,600,000 votes. President Bush with almost 2,800,000, about 51% of the total for the president. Now the difference comes down to, well, 135,000 provisional ballots that have been issued. The provisional ballots get issued if a voter has a problem at the polls, wants to vote anyway, they're not absolutely certain that his or her ballot is going to count, so they put his ballot, they let them cast the vote, put the ballot in a sealed envelope, and then set it aside. There are 135,000 of those, apparently, to be opened in Ohio if, in fact, it's determined that they could sway the outcome of this election. Now, the Republican side says there's no chance that they could do that. They have been assured of that by the Secretary of State in Ohio. Our Fox News political analysts, Weekly Standard editor Bill Kristol and Juan Williams, National Public Radio senior correspondent, are with us to discuss all of this. Bill Kristol, the White House seems pretty secure in saying that President Bush is going to win another 4 years.
Well, he is. He's going to win with 286 electoral votes, possibly 281 if New Mexico is still in doubt, but certainly Nevada and Iowa are in for Bush, and Ohio is an insurmountable lead. I mean, Kerry's not going to win 95% of the provisional ballots.
Juan, do you see it that way?
Yeah, I think it's very hard to overcome the numbers, but I think that Senator Edwards, spoke for, legions of Kerry supporters when he said that every vote must be counted, every vote has to count. And so what they're going to do is they're going to push the issue. I think there are lots of people who are concerned about keeping the country as one and making sure that everyone acknowledges the legitimacy of this election, an election in which President Bush won the popular vote. I think it's a very important point to make. But it's also important that the Democrats have the sense that there was no shenanigans, that every vote was counted in the state of Ohio.
Well, let's talk about what Senator Kerry should do now. Bill Kristol, would it be valuable to open all of those provisional ballots, to drag this thing out for another day or 2 or 11, as Ohio law would apparently allow?
Well, they can be open, but I think Senator Kerry should stand up this afternoon and say he believes that President Bush has won the presidency. He asks the Secretary of State to go ahead and open those ballots. But he will, if he wants, he can hold his formal concession for 11 days, but he should basically acknowledge that the election is over. I mean, look, Gerald Ford conceded in 1976 to Jimmy Carter when he had lost Ohio by 8,000 votes. And Ohio and one other state tipped the balance. He had lost those 2 states by less than 10,000 votes. Nixon conceded to Kennedy at this time in 1960. He had lost 2 states by much smaller margins. This is a large margin. This is not a close race. 0.5%, 0.25% is what makes a close race. This is a 2% margin. If Kerry goes with I think Edwards was laying the ground, was very moderate last night. He said, let's wait another day. He didn't say the race goes on. He didn't say we're going to litigate this. They're going to concede more or less, in my view, today. Whether he will absolutely concede or say, I want the ballots to be open, but I do think I want to acknowledge that it looks as if President Bush has won, and when we finish the counting, I expect he will have won, but I'll withhold my formal announcement for that. I think basically Bush will have won by tonight.
All right, Bill Kristol and Juan Williams, thank you both for being with us. So it looks like Ohio has given the victory to President Bush. More than 135,000 votes there, provisional ballots that have yet to be counted, but doesn't look like they're going to make a difference. It looks like President Bush has won a second term, although there has been no absolute projection of that from anybody yet, except for the President's Chief of Staff. We'll continue watching the numbers for you on Fox News Live after a short break. At the number down in the right-hand corner of your screen. Wall Street apparently likes the fact that President Bush has apparently won re-election, or at least that we're not going to have a repeat of 2004 with a 6-week wait to find out who our next president is going to be. Dow futures way up, more than 100 points at last viewing. Our managing business editor Neil Cavuto is going to be along in less than 10 minutes to sort out all of that for you. So there were long lines at the polls in Florida, which delayed the vote counting in some counties, but all in all, no major problems to report there. Let's check in with Fox News correspondent Orlando Salinas. He's live in West Palm Beach. Orlando.
Hey, John, as you said, no real major problems here in the state of Florida. There was no massive election breakdown, no massive breakdown or meltdown of these touchscreen voting machines that people were saying would happen. And political analysts say a big reason why Florida really seems to be free and clear this morning is because President Bush took this state by more than 300,000 votes. I want to show you some video. Yesterday, folks, as you were saying, John, lining up to vote in all of Florida's 67 counties, awfully busy, as many as 10 million Floridians expected to cast their ballots. In Miami-Dade and Broward counties, both heavily Democrat areas, some complaints about voting machine problems, complaints about long lines in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County. Senator Kerry beat out President Bush in those 3 counties, but in that all-important I-4 corridor from Tampa, St. Pete to Daytona Beach, the majority of those 700,000 undecided voters, those I'll make up my mind at the last minute voters, went in greater numbers for President Bush. Now, there were few reports at some polling sites, when voters pressed touchscreen machines, the opposite candidate's name popped up on that screen. Elections officials agreed, and after a while that glitch was fixed. Also on some screens, only Spanish text appeared, and in some cases, batteries died. Now, here in Palm Beach County, home of that butterfly ballot of 2000, the new wrinkle seemed to be more than 100,000 absentee ballots. As many as 70,000 have yet to be counted. We're told they will be. And in the hot race for the U.S. Senate seat left vacant by retiring Senator Bob Graham, Democrat Betty Castor appears right now to be behind by maybe just 1 point. Mel Martinez, the Republican, he already did have his own victory party, if you will, held it right around 1:30 yesterday morning. He says he is ready to go to work. John?
Orlando Salinas live in Palm Beach County. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, it looks like Republicans will keep control of the House of Representatives. Almost all sitting representatives in the 435-member House have won re-election. This makes the 6th straight election win for Republicans and the first time since 1933 that the party has achieved 12 consecutive years in control of the House. One Democrat who lost his bid for an open Democratic seat in the House, Nick Clooney, the father of actor George Clooney. Clooney was defeated by Republican businessman Jeff Davis for Northern Kentucky's 4th district seat. One Republican not returning, the longest-serving GOP House member, Congressman Philip Crane of Illinois. He lost his seat to Democratic challenger Melissa Bean. Crane had represented Chicago's 8th district for more than 30 years. Prince George's County firefighters in Maryland are battling a 3-alarm blaze at the county courthouse. Fire and EMS spokesman Chauncey Bowers says the fire in the 14,000 block of Main Street in Upper Marlboro began on the roof of the building. In the older section of the building that's being renovated, you can see that the smoke is pouring out of that building this morning. About 100 firefighters are on the scene, but as you can tell, that building is pretty fully involved. It's going to take a miracle to save what's left of it there. Again, this is in Prince George's County, Maryland, the old courthouse there that was under renovation, very much involved in a fire this morning, right after the election. At any rate, we'll have all of the numbers to crunch for you, and Neil Cavuto's business report coming up on Fox News Live. Well, Senator John Kerry hasn't conceded and President Bush hasn't claimed victory, but Wall Street seems to think we have a winner, and Wall Street seems to like that. Maybe it's that, maybe it's slightly lower oil prices, but at any rate, the guy who can sort it all out for us is our managing business editor, Neil Cavuto. He joins us now. Neil, good morning.
John, you're right. Both factors are helping today, but the biggest one certainly has to be the near certainty that President Bush was reelected. Wall Street abhors uncertainty and the fact that it looks fairly clear now that the president has won this race, and certainly convincingly in the popular vote front, and all but done on the electoral vote front, really adding sort of to the buying fervor on Wall Street today. Keep in mind, this largely Republican bastion had indeed preferred the president. They liked his tax cuts. They liked his dividend tax relief. They liked his capital gains relief. There, as you see, the Alzheimer's Foundation of America representatives ringing the opening bell on the NASDAQ. We're pretty soon going to be looking at the same in the New York Stock Exchange. The market's buoyed by the results last night because one of the biggest concerns for the markets, just uncertainty ahead of the election. I think we might even be seeing this type of growth, John, had it in fact been John Kerry the winner this morning. Maybe not to the degree we have been looking at thus far, only because they just wanted this over with, like probably many voters in this country. There, as you see, the big board, on the big board, the New York Stock Exchange, the Dow up nominally this morning, but the futures indicate the Dow 30 could be up anywhere between 100 and 130 points in short order. We'll have to watch that closely. Groups that are doing well thus far for the markets of the pharmaceutical stocks and the oil stocks expected to benefit under a continued Bush presidency. Those same issues likely would have been hit if it were John Kerry in the same position this morning. So one area that we're going to watch closely as well, John, later on today, bonds and interest rates. The feeling seems to be this is sort of a reverse of what the sentiment was not more than a few years ago, that this president is a spender and that the Republican Congress, emboldened by gains in the House and the Senate, will continue spending. That is going to be a depressive effect on the bond market because the market interprets that as being bad for deficits, which could lead to higher interest rates. Of course, it doesn't always work out that way, but try telling that to equity traders. Today, the Dow up about 54 points, the Dow at around 10,090. Like I said, be looking at that tick number there. We were showing a very strong tick number. That's a sentiment going forward that seems to show gains in excess of 100 points later. later on. Now, we do have a lot of economic news to continue as the day wears on. At 10 o'clock, we're going to get a good read on consumer sentiment and the mood of folks, the manufacturing index, how people are feeling about the services side and the factory side. And, of course, the granddaddy of all the economic numbers comes on Friday. That is the employment report for the month of October. That is expected to confirm what President Bush had been saying in his reelection effort, that the economy is picking up steam. Most are anticipating job gains in the vicinity of 175,000 to 200,000. If indeed that is the case, as many suspect it will be, it will provide ammunition for the president to say, you see, you reelected the right guy. But at this juncture, as we take a look at the corner wall and broad, 2 minutes into the trading day, all the major market averages are up. We'll see if they can contain it. What's interesting, across the board trading across much of Europe and Asia, keep in mind Tokyo was closed, up to no change at all. But by and large, the foreign community reacting to 4 more years of the president, some of whom have had difficulty with this president, but all acknowledging today, bar some sort of a Hail Mary pass on the part of the Kerry folks, is in there for 4 more years. Back to you.
Wall Street may be that Republican bastion, as you described, but you've said many times before, it generally does better under Democratic administration.
There are a lot of caveats to that, John. I didn't, you know, the grades to all of this story, but you know, Newt Gingrich was telling me yesterday on my show that yes, that is true to a degree, but keep in mind it does really well when you have a Democrat in the White House and a Republican Congress, as you had with Bill Clinton, sort of holding back his spending initiatives. You can interpret the data any way you want, but suffice it to say that this particular president, with his mix of tax cuts and investor relief, has really been a favorite in the investment community, and they look at him as sort of the right guy at the right time. Now, that could change if these deficits get a lot worse, or if interest rates start really climbing, or if the housing bubble, as some perceive it, bursts. But for now, they're all rallying around the president. We'll see how long that lasts, but for now, it looks good for him.
And the arrows are green.
Indeed.
Neil Cavuto, thank you very much.
Already.
U.S. troops keep a close watch on election results. I'm Lauren Green. American troops overseas have been glued to TV sets following the election results. The troops stationed at Camp Fallujah in Iraq watched live coverage as they ate breakfast this morning. They could be called on for a major offensive against that city. Some soldiers and Marines believe there could be an early end to the war if President Bush is reelected.
Bush wins. That's the big thing for me. You know, I know he's pro-military. That's a deciding factor for me. I think if Senator Kerry wins, probably gonna pull us out of here. We'll just be right back here in 10 years again. So.
Results of the presidential election in Afghanistan are now official. Hamid Karzai was officially declared the victor today, taking in over 55% of the vote. It took over 3.5 weeks to tally all the ballots. There were complaints of voter fraud, but an independent panel said that any irregularities at the polls had no major influence on the outcome. In Japan, a U.S. Army soldier who deserted in 1965 has pleaded guilty. Sergeant Charles Jenkins pleaded to deserting and fleeing to North Korea in order to avoid dangerous duty on the Korean Peninsula and Vietnam. A military judge sentenced Jenkins to 30 days in jail and a dishonorable discharge. But the judge recommended the jail term be suspended. Jenkins surrendered in September, 2 months after leaving North Korea for medical treatment in Japan. Britain's Queen Elizabeth opened a conference on climate change today in Germany. The British monarch is in the second day of a state visit to Germany. She's also focusing on present-day ties between Britain and Germany. And those are some of the stories we're following today. I'm Lauren Green.
Republicans have increased their majority in the Senate, and they dealt a defeat to the Senate Minority Leader Tom Daschle in South Dakota. On the presidential race, it looks like President Bush has won a second term, although it is not official yet. His side is not claiming well, the president himself is not claiming victory. His chief of staff, Andrew Card, told his victory party in the wee hours this morning that they are the victors. But there is no concession speech as yet from Senator Kerry's side. We could hear something from Senator Kerry sometime, well, anytime from about half an hour from now on, later this morning. So are there any clues yet to how long the counting in Ohio is going to go on? Jeff Goldblatt is live in Cleveland with that report for us. Jeff?
Hi, John. Good morning. Here are how things break down at this hour this morning. Obviously, the vote is unofficial, but the president is up in Ohio about 135,000 votes. Still left to be counted are your provisional votes and your military overseas votes, which tend to trend towards the president. So Democrats in Ohio are pretty much discounting that vote total. On the high end, you have President Kerry and his campaign saying there are about 250,000 votes still out there. On the lower end, you've got Ohio's Republican Secretary of State Ken Blackwell saying there are about 135,000 provisional ballots still out there. And something to keep in mind with your provisional ballots, the way the models usually are, all those ballots do not traditionally get counted. Some of them are dumped out as being illegally cast ballots, or in other words, they weren't cast in the right place. So Republicans are telling us, you don't have to be a rocket scientist here, that the math just doesn't work out. You have President Bush with a lead this morning unofficially of about 135,000, and the provisional ballots not much more than that. And so John Kerry would then have to need pretty much close to 100% of that outstanding total in order to take Ohio. John?
And does that include the military ballots? Are they considered provisional ballots as well, Jeff?
They're a separate number altogether, and again, they tend to trend towards the president in this case. And so Democrats here on the ground are telling us they're discounting those votes, that they don't believe that they're going to get the overwhelming majority of those votes at all, that they'd be surprised if they get many at all of those votes.
All right, Jeff Goldblatt in Cleveland reporting live. Thanks, Jeff. Senate Minority Leader Tom Daschle loses his Senate seat to former South Dakota Congressman John Thune. This marks the first time since 1952 that a party leader in the Senate failed to win a new term. Fox News correspondent Carol McKinley is live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, with more on that race. Carol?
Hi there, John. Well, Tom Daschle's quarter-of-a-century run in Congress is now over. I'm at the Convention Center in Sioux Falls, where lots of his supporters were here last night waiting for him to come down from his hotel room to talk to them. They waited until 2 and 3 in the morning. He wanted to wait until the Native American vote came in. He says he'll address his supporters and the press in about 2 hours. He did spend the night in the hotel here with his family watching the returns, but they weren't the returns he'd hoped for. Here are what the numbers look like for Tom Daschle and his opponent John Thune. It looks like John Thune won the election 51 to 49% by about 4,500 votes. Here in South Dakota, the current vote count is still not over because there are some still trickling in from the Native American counties of Todd and Shannon. Those will be mostly Democrat, but not enough to take the race. It had been neck and neck for weeks and impossible to predict, but really the line we heard as voters were coming out of the polls was the one John Thune used in his campaign over and over: it's time for a change. So after shaking just about every hand here in South Dakota in his 26 years in Congress and holding babies who are now adults, Tom Daschle has lost for the first time in his career. John Thune is also a household name here because he's a former congressman. He lost the election for senator to Tim Johnson 2 years ago by only 524 votes. He now goes to Washington, D.C. as South Dakota's freshman senator.
Thank you to all across South Dakota, those in the room this evening who've prayed for us, encouraged us, sent us emails, contributed to the campaign, and supported us in so many other ways. It truly was a team effort this year, and I want to say thank you to all of you for supporting us, for standing with us day in and day out.
It was the most expensive race in South Dakota history because there was so money coming in from the outside. Republicans wanted to topple Tom Daschle. $30 million from both campaigns. That amounted to about $80 per vote. John?
Carol McKinley reporting live from South Dakota. Thank you. A big bond measure to raise funds for embryonic stem cell research passes in California. Voters there favored Proposition 71 heavily in exit polls. Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger campaigned for it despite White House opposition to that kind of research. The $3 billion measure would provide $300 million a year for 10 years. Conservatives oppose the measure on moral and budgetary grounds. Supporters say stem cell research deserves more funding than the federal limit of $25 million per year. Also, California's 3 strikes law stands as is. Proposition 66, a measure that would have softened California's landmark criminal sentencing law, has been rejected. The three strikes law imposes prison terms of 25 years to life on those convicted of a third felony. Opponents of the rejected measure say the three strikes law is an effective crime fighter and would have freed thousands of felons. Supporters of Prop 66 say the three strikes law unfairly imprisons small-time offenders in California. Voters in 11 states approve bans on gay marriage. Folks in Arkansas, Georgia, Kentucky, Michigan, Mississippi, Montana, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Ohio, Utah, and Oregon have resoundingly rejected same-sex marriages. All 11 states approved constitutional amendments limiting marriage to the union of a man and a woman. And a Fox News alert, if you're in Prince George's County, Maryland, and you see smoke on the horizon, this is what it is. The old courthouse on Upper Marlboro on Main Street, the 14,000 block, is heavily involved in flames right now, a 3-alarm fire. This part of the building was under renovation. Whether or not that sparked the fire is not clear yet. The good news is nobody has been hurt. About 100 firefighters are battling this one. It looks like it's going to be too late to save the building. They're just trying to keep the fire from spreading to other structures. We'll keep an eye on this one for you, let you know more about what happens there in Prince George's County, Maryland. All right, so it looks as though President Bush will be the winner of this You Decide 2004 election, but there are still questions, including will we hear a concession speech from Senator John Kerry? His side says they want to get every vote counted. That includes the state of Ohio, where Bush seems to hold a commanding lead, but there are some questions up in the air there. We'll try and get you updated on what's going on in Ohio and some of the other states that have not reported, including Nevada and New Mexico. Those reports coming up on Fox News Live. Fox News alert, we are still waiting for word, either from the White House or from Boston, that one of the two candidates is going to make some kind of a speech. We know from Senator Kerry's campaign that they won't be saying anything until at least 10 o'clock this morning. They have already been up studying the return numbers in Ohio. Privately, off camera, they are saying that it doesn't look good for Senator Kerry. They don't see a way that they can overcome President Bush's margin in the popular vote in Ohio. President Bush, for his part, although his chief of staff, Andrew Card, claimed victory on behalf of the White House at about 4 o'clock this morning, they have not made the same kind of statement, or we have not heard the same kind of statement from the president's mouth. So the waiting goes on. Nothing as yet from either camp, either a concession speech or a victory speech. The election seems to hang on what happened in Ohio. The Kerry campaign is not yet prepared to concede the state, although who knows what they'll say in their statement, which could come in a few minutes. They have not absolutely guaranteed that it'll be at 10 a.m. Eastern. Should they concede now, or should they wait until the last provisional ballot is counted? Let's ask former general counsel for the RNC, Jan Barron, and Democratic strategist Bob Beckel. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good morning, Jeff.
Bob, if they were to wait for the counting of all of those votes, the provisional ballots in Ohio, that could take, what, 10, 11 days?
Right.
Is the country ready for that?
Oh, sure. I mean, look, one of the things it seems to me that would make sense is that even if it looks like it would be almost impossible, except maybe numerically with 100%, you've got to remember that Democrats still believe that in 2000 a lot of their votes weren't counted. So what's the hurt in counting their votes so that nobody can say the votes weren't counted? I mean, it just seems to me to be a logical sort of peace pipe to be sent over. And if it's going to take 3, 4, 5 days, so what? I mean, Bush is still in the White House, regrettably. And although I do have a new theory about what we should do here, but I'll tell you about that later.
All right. Well, Jan Barron, what do you think? Should there be some kind of a concession speech from Senator Kerry today, or should we do as Bob suggests and wait this thing out?
I think everyone, the media and the political campaigns, are all gun-shy from Florida in 2000. And as a result, what I see going on is sort of excessive good manners. anyone who takes a look at these numbers, 135,000 votes in Ohio, tens or 20,000 votes in states like Iowa and New Mexico and Nevada, these are huge numbers. They're not like what we saw in 2000, where Florida seemed to be in doubt because of a 500 or 600 vote difference, or New Mexico with 300 votes. It is unprecedented for a candidate to win a state like Ohio with a fairly undisputed 135,000 vote margin and not win that state. The only issue that remains are these provisional ballots, and they don't seem to even be as high as the vote margin. And even if all of those votes were legal, and our experience says that the vast majority of provisional votes are cast by voters who are not legal or eligible to vote, even if they were all legal, I don't see any mathematical way in which Senator Kerry can make up that huge difference in a state like Ohio.
Bob Beckel, does the Kerry campaign run any risks by trying to wait this thing out?
Well, I mean, I don't know what the risk is. I mean, if you lose, you lose. I mean, what are they going to do? They're going to spank him? I mean, it's not like Florida. It's not. I don't sense on my side, except for some deep resentment, that I'm still trying to figure out why it's as deep as it is, that there isn't the sort of thing in Florida where we know, in fact, that a lot of our votes weren't counted. In this case, I come back to the point, Jan, I agree with you in terms of numbers. I just don't understand why it doesn't, just to get it off the table. So there's not a question mark left, do it. And the other thing I wanted to say is that I think now that slavery's taken care of, I'm for letting the South form its own nation.
Okay.
I think they ought to have their own confederacy.
Bob Beckel and Jan Barron. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us. We'll keep an eye on those numbers, have you updated straight ahead on Fox. Taking a look at the map there, President Bush with 51% of the vote nationally, more than 58 million. Senator Kerry with about 54, almost 55 million, 48% of the vote. Largely in the Northeast, the upper Midwest, and of course the West Coast is where Senator Kerry did well. President Bush capturing the broad swath of the middle of the country and of course the South as well. Still no report from Nevada and New Mexico, but those two states are expected to end up in the Bush column. Let's talk about all of this with Mark Leibovich, national political reporter for The Washington Post. Mark, the Republicans are saying, you know, this is really a huge victory for the president. It's been since 1988 that we've had a president who actually won a majority of the vote.
Well, yeah, and I mean, clearly, I mean, the Bush camp and the Republicans are very, very bullish on what went on last night and yesterday. You know, the $64 million question or $64,000 question is, you know, what the Kerry campaign is going to say in the next, you know, hour or so. I mean, you hear a lot of different things over who might speak, what they might say. But obviously, there's a lot of soul searching going on, a lot of number crunching, and I guess.
But this isn't Florida of 2000. I mean, we're not talking about a margin of 537 votes or whatever. We're talking about more than 100,000 votes in Ohio, and that would appear to be an insurmountable lead for the president.
Right. Right. Clearly, numerically speaking, this is not a Florida situation, although I do think that what happened in Florida 4 years ago is coloring how people are proceeding today, both, you know, the media and the Kerry people, and also how people are perceiving this. You know, maybe they're a little gun-shy about declaring something one way or the other, but I do think that, you know, I think history is a guide, and we're going to keep seeing, you know, a lot of that informed by what happened 4 years ago.
Do you get a sense of why it is that the polls yesterday, after the projection polls were so wrong, why they got it so wrong about what the eventual results would be?
It's unclear. I think, you know, quite often exit polls are wrong, and I think in this media age where there's this rush to speed and there's a rush to quick judgments, and, you know, frankly, there's a need for immediate gratification, we tend to jump to conclusions based on very, very little data. So, again, I think turnout was huge yesterday by many accounts. You know, maybe Kerry's numbers were better early and Bush's numbers were better later, and it's as simple as that.
What pressures will there be? I mean, which side is feeling the greater pressure to either make a concession speech or a victory speech?
Well, clearly the Kerry campaign is, I don't know if it's pressure, but clearly the onus is on them to either concede or really at least give some sort of signal about how they're going to do or what they're going to do in the next few days. You know, pressure is sort of out the window in that the election is over. You know, there might be some pressure building on Kerry personally if people, especially in the Democratic Party, start leaning on him a little bit to make some sort of determination. But, you know, again, this has been a very long fight for them, and I think they're going to, you know, wait to exhaust this as much as possible before they actually concede.
Mark Leibovich, the national political reporter for the Washington Post. Mark, thank you.
Thanks, John.
And it bears repeating, we are waiting any time now for either President Bush or Senator Kerry to make some kind of an announcement. Senator John Edwards is the one who said last night that they will fight on. President Bush left it to his chief of staff, Andrew Card, to say in the wee hours of this morning that they believe that they have a victory. But we haven't heard it from the principals themselves yet. When that happens, you can count on seeing it here live on Fox News Channel. Keep it here. We'll keep you posted on all of the results still coming in from You Decide 2004. Well, New England won the Super Bowl. Boston won the World Series, but it looks like the favorite son candidate is not going to win the presidency this year. We are waiting for some kind of statement from Senator John Kerry's campaign. They have said that nothing will become until right this moment, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. They said they would make no statement until at least this hour. Whether that statement could come this hour, whether it could come later today, whether it might come later this week, we do not know. But as of now, no concession speech from Senator Kerry's side and no victory speech from President Bush himself, although his chief of staff, Andrew Card, emerged to the victory party that was waiting to greet the president early this morning, about 4 a.m. He said that they claimed victory on behalf of the president, but we haven't heard that yet from the president's mouth himself. Senator John Edwards emerged about 2:30 a.m. He said, quote, "We have waited 4 years for this victory. We can wait one more night." In other words, they want to absolutely make sure that the Ohio situation is, as it seems to be, a victory for President Bush. Good morning. I'm John Scott, along with Bridget Quinn, who joins us now for more coverage of You Decide 2004. Bridget?
That's right, John. And as you were just explaining, no concession from John Kerry. President Bush not yet declaring victory, but as John mentioned, his chief of staff says he's convinced that the president has secured another term.
Let's get a live report now from Mike Emanuel. He's out at the White House this morning. Mike?
Bridget, good morning. No formal reaction from President Bush so far, but his aides and surrogates say they are convinced the president has won re-election. It was a very late night for Mr. Bush, his family, and advisors as well. President Bush invited cameras in to capture him watching returns of his final campaign for public office. White House Chief of Staff Andy Card says this presidential election is the first since 1988 in which the winner received a majority of the popular vote. 1988 is the election when the president's father was elected. Andy Card says the Bush-Cheney team estimates the president has won re-election with at least 286 electoral votes.
And in this election, President Bush received more votes than any presidential candidate in our country's history.
Now, regarding the battleground state of Ohio, the White House Chief of Staff says the Ohio Secretary of State has told the Bush-Cheney campaign the president's lead is statistically insurmountable. There it is on your screen. It's a lead they say cannot be reversed when provisional ballots in Ohio are all counted. Historically, a Republican has not won the White House without winning the Buckeye State. Here's the White House Chief of Staff explaining why President Bush has not claimed victory so far.
President Bush decided to give Senator Kerry the respect of more time to reflect on the results of this election. The president will be making a statement later today.
And so far, we do not have a timetable for that. Senator Bill Frist told Fox today that he is convinced President Bush has won re-election. Republicans are celebrating also the pickup of seats in the Senate and House as well. Back to you guys in New York.
Mike Emanuel reporting live from the White House. Thank you, Mike.
All right, so the ballot battle still in full swing. No concession from Senator John Kerry.
We are expecting a statement from someone in the Kerry campaign at any moment now. Kelly Wright is live in Boston. Kelly?
John, good morning to you and to Bridget as well. It's been a very long election day and night for John Kerry and John Edwards. Now, as you've mentioned, John, we did expect something around 10 a.m., but we're also getting this word from the Kerry camp that the Kerry senior advisors are conferring with each other about the data in Ohio, and that they would also be able to issue some kind of paper statement or on-camera statement sometime mid-morning. Well, we are just getting into the mid-morning hours, so we will just have to wait and see what will happen next and when. Having said all that, let's take you back to what unfolded here. It was a day of tremendous mood swings for the Kerry camp throughout Election Day. The mood was optimism. Thousands of supporters gathered in Copley Square, some singing and dancing in the rain to the sounds of entertainers like Sheryl Crow. The Kerry camp went into Election Day thinking they would gain a victory from new registrants and a large voter turnout. The crowd was eager to hear John Kerry speak to them, win or lose. Instead, when President Bush began to show signs of winning and the Buckeye state of Ohio began to buck the trends, running mate John Edwards came forward to address the crowd shortly before 3 a.m. to thank the die-hard supporters and vowing to fight.
John and I are so proud of all of you who are here with us and all of you across the country who have stood with us in this campaign. John Kerry and I made a promise to the American people that in this election, every vote would count and every vote would be counted.
Now, Ohio state election officials say there are only about 143,000 provisional and overseas ballots in Ohio that hang in the balance. Ohio Secretary of State Kenneth Blackwell says the number could be as high as 175,000. Despite that, some analysts say the president's lead is insurmountable. Ohio Republican Senators Mike DeWine and George Voinovich issued the following statement about the Election Day drama unfolding in their state. They said, based on our experience in Ohio politics, we believe that the president's lead in Ohio is clear and that it cannot be surmounted. Senator Kerry should concede defeat and spare the country the turmoil of another drawn-out election. And we're also getting this word that even some Ohio Democrats have gone on to state or tell Fox News that they're not optimistic about their chances in Ohio as well. They say this is not a Florida, and here's what they lay out. They say that they have three options. One, they will pull up tent and admit defeat. Two, they fight like hell. Three, they wait the 11 days knowing that they are not likely to win, but able to show that the American public, that every vote was counted. So that's the situation here. John and Bridget, back to you.
All right, Kelly Wright, thank you.
So let's talk about the Ohio factor now with our guests. We're joined by Democratic media strategist Steve McMahon and also Brad Blakeman, former deputy assistant to the first President Bush. Steve, I want to start with you. What would you recommend the Kerry campaign do regarding Ohio?
Well, I actually would just recommend what President Bush has recommended, that they do whatever they think is the right thing to do. I mean, obviously, they're smart enough to be able to look at the numbers and see how difficult it would be to overturn what appears to be, at least for President Bush, that may be insurmountable. On the other hand, they have campaigned for a long time saying that every vote should be counted and every voter matters. So they're in a position where, you know, I think they're going to do the right thing, but, you know, what is the right thing? Is it to wait out the provisional ballots to let everybody have their vote counted? Is it to say that if the election finishes the way it appears to look today, we congratulate President Bush, but we're going to have these votes counted? Or is it to simply pull up stake? I think they're having that conversation right now, but I'm confident they're going to do the right thing.
Well, Brad, what should the White House do? A lot of President Bush's supporters were waiting until the wee hours of this morning, some of them even sleeping on the floor, waiting for him to come out and make some kind of a victory speech. He didn't do that. He sent Andrew Card to do it instead. Should he come out and claim victory before Senator Kerry says anything?
Well, John, it may come to that. What this president has done is shown the United States and the whole world what a classy person he is. He's given John Kerry and John Edwards enough time to evaluate their situation in Ohio. Ohio is not going to come their way. Let's not put the country through an exercise in futility. And I think that all good things will come to an end, and at the appropriate time, the president will come out and claim victory if, in fact, John Kerry has not come out and conceded this election.
Well, Steve, if the Kerry campaign decides to sort of wait out this Ohio situation, do they run the risk of looking like maybe sore losers or putting through putting the country through some unnecessary stress?
That's clearly a judgment they're going to have to make. I mean, you know, there are going to be people who suggest that's the case. I mean, I agree with Brad that the president has done a very gracious thing by giving Senator Kerry time to reflect. And I'm sure that in Boston right now, they're looking at this lead, they're looking at the number of provisional ballots, they're reflecting upon the fact that every vote should count and every vote should be counted. But, you know, they can do the math, and I expect that you're going to hear something from the Kerry campaign, and I think you're probably going to hear something soon.
It appears, well, for instance, in Ohio, Gerald Ford lost Ohio to Jimmy Carter by 8,000 votes. The fact that you've got, what, 140,000 or more separating these two candidates, Brad, it would seem to be an overwhelming victory for the president this time around.
It is an overwhelming victory, John, and look at the country as a whole, and look what's happened this year. We've picked up seats in the Senate. We picked up seats in the House. The majority of governors are Republican. The mandate is clear. So really what we need to do now is get together as a nation, get this election behind us, and do the important work of the people. Let's all be united today as Americans and rejoice in the fact that in America we have elections that are free from violence, and that everybody gets their vote counted, and let's move on.
Yeah, this is our bloodless coup. Steve, we introduced you as a Democratic media strategist. Is there going to be a lot of soul searching in the Democratic Party after the results of this election, given the numbers that Brad just talked about?
Well, I think, you know, anytime you are unsuccessful in an election, and whatever happens in the presidential, you know, clearly we didn't do as well in the Senate and the House as we'd hoped. It's a time for reflection and to think about what you might have done better, how you might have communicated a little bit more clearly, and what you need to do in the future to improve your performance. So, yeah, I'm sure that there's going to be soul searching. I don't think there's going to be a lot of finger pointing. I mean, the president ran a very, very disciplined, effective campaign, and John Kerry ran a very, very disciplined, effective campaign, particularly at the end. And I think, you know, the outcome here, so close, but in John Kerry's case, perhaps so far away, is one that, you know, both campaigns can be proud that they ran an effective race. It was a very, very hard-fought one, and it was a very close one at the end of the day. I mean, 120,000 votes separating them in Ohio is, you know, it's not really that much in the scheme of things, and I think the Kerry campaign did a pretty good job as well as the Bush campaign.
Steve McMahon on the Democratic side, Brad Blakeman on the Republican side. Appreciate both of you joining us this morning.
Thank you, John.
So nothing official yet from either Senator Kerry's campaign or from President Bush himself, although his side has essentially claimed victory. We could get a statement from either of the principals in those two campaigns at any minute now. We are watching for that from either Boston or from the White House. We'll keep you updated here on Fox News Live as the results are still coming in from You Decide 2004.
In the morning on the East Coast, and we still do not have an official winner of the presidential race. We are waiting. This could happen really at any time, that John Kerry could have some sort of a statement to make. We'd heard that it could happen anytime after 10 o'clock Eastern, but no set time. We don't know if and when there is going to be an announcement.
We also could get some results from Nevada or New Mexico, one of those western states that sort of closed the doors and turned out the lights last night without giving us official numbers. Either one of those states could put President Bush over the top. In the meantime, Kerry supporters are clinging to the possibility that the yet uncounted provisional and absentee ballots will turn the tide in his favor in Ohio.
That's right, and as that seems less and less likely, how long can that count go on? Todd Connor is live this morning from Cleveland. Todd, good morning.
Good morning, Bridget and John. But even some state Democratic leaders are telling Fox News that President Bush has too large of a lead for them to overcome. At least that's what they're telling us off camera right now. They just don't feel very optimistic about their chances of making up that 135,000 vote deficit. And for Ohio, Secretary of State Ken Blackwell, the man charged with making sure that all of these votes are counted and that it is done legally, he says the picture is pretty clear.
If, in fact, the margin of victory for one candidate or the other is greater than the number of provisional ballots, then you can have a reasonable guess who won the election.
Now, Blackwell believes there were about 135,000 provisional ballots cast, and that's approximately the same amount, a little bit less than what Senator Kerry is trailing President Bush by as we speak. Many believe then that there is no fuzzy math here. The numbers basically speak for themselves. Democratic leaders say essentially that leaves them with three choices here in the state of Ohio. They can pick up stakes, pull up their stakes, and just call it quits and say we were beaten fair and square. They can fight like crazy, or they can wait the 11 days or so that the Secretary of State has to make these provisional votes official, knowing even then that they probably wouldn't be able to make up the difference, but they would be able to show the American public that their vote did count. At least that's the way the Democratic leaders put it. But they also say that they know they don't have much to stand on here as far as legal challenges go. They say Ohio is not a Florida. That is the latest from here. Back to you.
All right, from Cleveland, Todd Connery, thank you.
So we are still waiting to get the absolute final numbers. President Bush at 269 electoral votes. He needs 270 to win the outright victory. The popular vote very much in his favor, more than 51% for the president. The first time since 1988 that a president has apparently won re-election with an absolute majority of the votes cast. We'll be back with more coverage for you on Fox News Live.
Morning after you decide 2004, and in a sense we're still deciding, we're still waiting in any event to find out the official winner. We're waiting to find out the official results in Ohio in particular. We're waiting this morning, by the way. We heard that the Kerry camp might have a statement sometime after 10 o'clock Eastern. Could be a couple of hours, could be a couple of minutes. We just don't know at this point. But again, Ohio seems to be the big question mark. We have also not yet heard from President Bush. We did earlier this morning hear from Andrew Card, the White House Chief of Staff, who said that we are convinced that President Bush has won re-election with at least 286 electoral college votes, more votes than any presidential candidate in our country's history. All right, but Democrats around the country wondering what happened after yesterday's exit polls had them thinking Kerry was leaping ahead to a sizable lead in the popular vote. Let's talk to radio talk show host and Fox News political analyst Tammy Bruce, and also with us radio talk show host Leslie Marshall. Good morning to you both. And
Hi there. Good morning.
Tammy, if those exit polls were right, we would be calling him President-elect Kerry this morning. What happened?
Well, it was obviously pretty cruel of a situation, but here's what has changed, and I think that we had old models applied to this election that just simply don't work anymore. You had a massive amount of people doing early voting. We had, as we all know now, the biggest turnout in this nation's history, people who had never voted before. And I think that exit polling is based on a model that very often doesn't work anyway, and especially when things are close. Even though for us, the president's popular margin of 3 million plus votes seems like a blowout, in reality, 2 or 3 percentage points is very close. Right. So you have exit polling that could not reflect the new dynamic in this nation, and I think just does not work when you have a close election like this.
Leslie Marshall, is that what you would attribute it to?
Well, actually, I agree with Tammy on that. I'm not a big fan of polls, and quite frankly, we have to look at the whole cell phone genre. When we look at young adults who are using cell phones in their home as opposed to residential phones that people can't access for polling purposes. I don't put a huge amount of credibility in the polls for any election, and especially in this day and age. So I don't disagree with Tammy on that. That's not, I think, a partisan issue right now.
And since Leslie mentioned the young vote, it begs the question, Tammy, what happened? All this voter die, they didn't seem to vote as much.
Well, you know, let's not be surprised when all of this shakes out. The reality is Democrats did vote. Many of them, like myself, voted for the president. Young people voted. And if you noticed early on, all of those kids polls, when kids were voting in elementary and high schools, they were voting in massive margins for the president. So what the good thing is for the Democratic Party, they are going to have to adjust, become relevant again, and be able to answer and speak to the majority of Americans. And I think that party is going to have to make huge changes, will do so, and will become more reflective of what Americans want to see, and we'll have a pretty exciting race in another 4 years.
Leslie, become relevant? I know you're going to want to weigh in on that one. Go ahead.
Well, if you're saying become relevant means that we all become born-again Christians, which it seems the vote's hinging upon in the state of Ohio, or I am a Christian. I am a Christian, and it's not an insult to Americans.
I'm a Democrat, and it's about
we all can put labels on ourselves, Tammy.
And not socialist.
We all can put labels on ourselves.
Let me jump in. And Leslie, what should John Kerry do this morning?
Obviously, everyone knows that this is not going to go in Senator Kerry's favor, but the Kerry-Edwards camp has said for the past year in campaigning that every vote will count and every vote will be counted. That doesn't mean that they wait 11 days, nor do I think they will. I do feel they'll do the right thing. But they also have said that they weren't going to say anything till after 10 a.m. Eastern time, and we're not that many minutes beyond that currently.
All righty. Leslie Marshall and Tammy Bruce, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Once again, we are waiting to hear from the Kerry camp. President Bush has not declared victory. We haven't heard from him, so we will certainly be looking for that.
And it appears that Washington Redskins predictor thing goes out the window. If they lose their home game before the election, the incumbent is supposed to lose, but it doesn't look like that one holds true anymore.
All right.
All right.
Another myth shattered.
You going to shatter any more myths in the next hour, Bridget?
We're going to see what happens. Again, we're waiting to hear from the Kerry camp. We're waiting to hear from the White House. We have so much more coming up. We also will have a market check. There's a sneak peek. Markets seem to like what's happened. Dow up. Well, we'll take a closer look coming up. Keep it right here. You're watching Fox News Live. Again, still waiting to find out who the official winner is, but the markets seem to have some opinions already about an hour into trading. Let's get an update now from Brenda Butner. Hey, Brenda.
Hey, Bridget. It may not be official, but the election is over as far as Wall Street is concerned, and big buying there is sending the clear message from the street. President Bush is the winner, and so are the bulls. A real rally for stocks. Let's just take a look at these numbers an hour and change after the opening bell. The Dow up 127 points. The NASDAQ gaining 22, well above 2,000, and the S&P better by 13. Wall Street looking forward to another 4 years with President Bush in the White House, and also celebrating that finally, a huge cloud of uncertainty is removed from the market. Investors welcoming Bush's lead as he is seen as more pro-business than the Democratic challenger. He has promised to keep intact many of his tax cuts and even make broader changes in the tax code. Some sectors to watch today: healthcare and major drug companies such as Pfizer. They are almost all up in early trading and could lead the market today. That's because there was fear that a President Kerry would hit their bottom lines hard. Defense stocks also on the offense, surging today on the election news. Shares of Boeing, Northrop Grumman among the advancers. And in the midst of all the election numbers, we've got a new number that shows the economy is doing just fine, thank you very much. A closely watched index of the services sector shows it grew again last month, much more than expected. Factory orders, however, were down, a surprise to economists. But you need look no further than this to know what Wall Street thinks. Blue chips are firmly in the green. The Dow soaring. There's the big board. It's up now 133 points. The post-election rally that many anticipated now finally reality on Wall Street. And you can get the closing numbers on your world with Neil Cavuto. Also, Neil asked the question, the Bush agenda for 4 more years, bold or humble? I'm Brenda Butner, and that's your Fox Stocks Report. Back over to you, Bridget.
All right, Brenda, thank you.
Beheadings in Iraq. Hello, everyone. I'm Patty Ann Brown. The Arab TV station Al Jazeera is reporting the beheading of 3 Iraqi National Guardsmen. The group accused the 3 of spying for U.S. troops in Iraq and helping to arrest resistance fighters. And on an Islamic website, another militant group claims it beheaded an Iraqi major. It accused him of helping U.S. forces. A suspected homicide bomber blew up his vehicle on the main road to Baghdad airport today. The explosion killed an Iraqi security guard and wounded at least 7 civilians. The bomb went off on the approach to a U.S. military checkpoint that controls access to the airport. But the military says no Americans were hurt. American troops overseas have been glued to television sets following the presidential election results. Troops stationed at Camp Fallujah in Iraq watched live coverage as they ate breakfast this morning. They could be called on for a major offensive against that city. Some soldiers and Marines believe there could be an early end to the war if President Bush is confirmed re-elected.
I hope Bush wins. That's the big thing for me. You know, I know he's pro-military. That's a deciding factor for me. I think if Senator Kerry wins, probably gonna pull us out of here, and we'll just be right back here in 10 years again. So.
In Prince George's County, Maryland, firefighters are struggling to contain a rapidly spreading 3-alarm fire at a landmark courthouse. The fire has engulfed most of the historic county courthouse in Upper Marlboro. A fire department spokesman says the fire started on the roof in an older section of the building that's being renovated. The county office of the state's attorney says land records and criminal case records are at risk. And those are some of the stories we're following today. I'm Patty Ann Brown. An update for you now on a Senate race of great interest. As you might know, in South Dakota, John Thune scored a win over the minority leader of the Senate, Tom Daschle. And we're now hearing this morning that Senator Harry Reid is expected to announce, he's a Democrat from Nevada, expected to announce later today that he plans to run for Tom Daschle's job, Senate Minority Leader. Reid might be holding a news conference, but a Reid spokesperson is saying that Reid also might just decide to put out some paper making the announcement and instead of holding a news conference for all of us media types and then spend the day working the phones from Vegas. Nonetheless, we will not know anything until we hear from Senator Daschle himself. We're expecting that somewhere within the next hour. And of course, you can expect live coverage, as always, right here on Fox. Well, President Bush himself, as you probably know, has not declared victory, but according to his campaign, he could do that very soon. Let's get more now from Mike Emanuel live from the White House. Mike, what is the latest?
Well, hi, Bridget. Yeah, we know the president and vice president were up very late last night. There was some talk that the president might go over to the Reagan building here in Washington and make some sort of statement in the wee hours of the morning. Then the ultimate decision was made to have Chief of Staff Andy Card go over and tell supporters and reporters that basically that the Chief of Staff believed that the president did well enough to win the race. There are the numbers on your screen. 99% of the votes in, 51 to 48, Bush over Kerry at this point. So at this point, we believe that the president is waiting for Senator Kerry to take a look at the numbers. There you have Ohio on your screen, 51-49, and we have based on the information, based on the votes, decided that President Bush, our decision team, has decided that President Bush has won the state of Ohio, a critical battleground state that the president invested a lot of time and energy in. And so we're waiting to hear when the president decides he has something to say. At this point, no concrete timetable. He may be waiting to hear from Senator Kerry first. Bridget?
Right, that may well be the case. Mike Emanuel, we thank you very much. Well, let's find out what the Kerry camp is thinking about, promising to hold out until election officials count every vote. Kelly Wright, live at their campaign headquarters in Boston. Kelly, any movement there? Any indication that anybody's going to come out and say anything soon?
Bridget, so far nothing yet. No concession, no information coming from the Kerry camp. As for all we know, there's still a full lid on everything. That's news speak for that there's no event being covered. There's no video of John Kerry, no statements from the Kerry camp. We do understand that his senior advisors have been conferring about Ohio and the data from Ohio, and that they've also initiated or at least concluded that they will possibly talk mid-morning, issuing a statement perhaps via email or on camera. We just don't know yet. So obviously they're looking over all of the details about that provisional vote out in Ohio. Now, Ohio Democrats also indicate that they are not optimistic they can win, even if they go forward with contesting the Ohio vote. They go on to say that they have three choices. One is to, of course, pull up their tent and admit defeat. Two is to fight like hell. And three, they say, wait the 11 days knowing they are not likely to win, but able to show the American viewer and voter, like John Edwards said here last night, that every vote counts and they will fight for every vote. So we'll just have to wait and see. Bridget, back to you.
All right, we are waiting along with you, Kelly Wright. Thank you very much. And all eyes again this morning, as we've been saying, on Ohio. Where do things really stand, though, in that state as we speak? Todd Connor joining us live from Cleveland with the update. Todd?
Good morning, Bridget. We are waiting for Kerry to be a good American, but are prepared if he's not. That's one of the latest statements from local Republican leaders here in the state of Ohio, meaning they are ready to take on the Kerry camp if he in fact does decide to fight this one out. However, right now that is totally up in the air. Local Democratic leaders here in Ohio are telling Fox News that really they don't feel they can make up the difference, the vote difference, even if all of these provisional ballots would happen to go their way, or at least most of them. And that's essentially what the Secretary of State here in Ohio is saying, that the numbers just don't match up. President Bush is ahead of Senator Kerry by more votes than there are provisional ballots yet to be counted, even taking into account absentee ballots from military personnel overseas. There is belief here in the state that the margin is just too wide, but we are waiting to hear what direction they will take this one here in Ohio. Bridget?
Checking back with you, Todd, shortly. Thank you very much. Well, Republicans will keep control of both houses of Congress, and they have widened their majority. There was an historic loss in the Senate, and Democrats will have to pick a new minority leader. Fox's Megan Kendall live with more about this from Washington. Megan, good morning.
Morning, Bridget. Yeah, it was good news for Republicans in the U.S. Senate yesterday. The GOP maintaining its control and adding at least 2 seats to give Republicans a 53-member majority, with 2 races still too close to call. One key seat picked up by the GOP belonged to Democrat heavyweight Tom Daschle, watching a tight race last night with his family that wound up with Republican John Thune as the victor, 51 to 49%. Now, there are reports today, as you mentioned earlier, that Senator Harry Reid of Nevada will announce today he will run to replace Daschle as the Senate Minority Leader. Still too close to call are Senate races in Florida and Alaska. In the Sunshine State, Republican Mel Martinez claimed victory in the race to replace retiring Democrat Bob Graham. Martinez is showing a lead of about 1% over Democrat Betty Castor. So far, though, she's refused to concede. A similar story in Alaska, where Republican incumbent Lisa Murkowski has declared victory, but Democrat Tony Knowles has not admitted defeat. Murkowski has about a 4% lead. Now, however, there were some Democrat victories last night, like that of Barack Obama.
Really what we want to do is set up a strong constituent service office, hire up staff, spend time listening not only to voters who voted for me, but also those who didn't vote for me, and then start charting out an agenda for how I can work effectively in the minority party in Washington.
The Illinois senator-elect talking there about his plan to bring constituents together. As expected, Obama won handily over Republican Alan Keyes. Obama will now be the only African-American in the U.S. Senate. One lingering question, given these results, is what will happen now to the Supreme Court? Because Senate Republicans have a numerical majority, but not an operational majority of 60 seats, they may face the same problems in confirming any new Supreme Court justices that they faced in trying to confirm lower federal court judges these last 4 years. The Democrats preventing confirmation through filibusters. With as many as 3 Supreme Court seats potentially opening up over the next term, you can count, Bridget, on this remaining a hot-button issue. Back to you.
All right, Megan, thank you. And with more on Senate Minority Leader Tom Daschle's defeat, Fox News correspondent Carol McKinley live, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Carol.
Well, it's over for Tom Daschle, Bridget. After 26 years, almost a little more than a quarter of a century, he is now out. He's expected to give a press conference in about an hour here. We're at the convention center here in Sioux Falls at the Sheraton Hotel, where he spent the night with his family watching returns. They weren't the returns he'd hoped for, as he sat grim-faced watching. He was mostly 2% behind for a lot of the night. The current vote count, with some still trickling in from Native American counties of Todd and Shannon, are mostly Democrat. Traditionally, his opponent, John Thune, won the election by around 4,500 votes. The final tally, we're thinking, is going to be around 51 to 49%. Now, the race had been neck and neck for weeks and impossible to predict, but the people we talked to as they were voting kept saying over and over again, it's time for change. And that's what John Thune's mantra had been throughout his campaign. The race had been neck and neck, but after shaking just about every hand in South Dakota in his 26 years in Congress, He held babies who are now adults. Daschle has lost for the first time in his career. Now, John Thune is also a household name here in South Dakota because he's a former congressman. He lost the election for Senate to Tim Johnson 2 years ago by only 524 votes. He came in at his place where all the Republicans were last night and gave a victory speech around 3:15 in the morning. He now goes to Washington, D.C. as a freshman senator.
I want to say thank you to Senator Daschle for his many contributions to public service and for a hard-fought campaign. Tom Daschle has given 30 years of his life to public service, and for that, all South Dakotans owe him a big debt of gratitude.
Now, South Dakotans normally turn out well, but this year they're saying they're thinking around 80%, which could be the largest turnout in the country. We did have word from the chairman of the Republican Senatorial Committee, George Allen, who is a senator from Virginia. He says beating Daschle is comparable to having 3 seats in the Senate. Back to you.
Carol McKinley live. Carol, thank you very much. And we will have more on the historic loss for Tom Daschle coming up. He's expected to actually address the media sometime within the next hour. And already somebody is waiting in the wings for his job. We're just also hearing that Senator Harry Reid, a Democrat from Nevada, expected to announce later today that he wants to run for Daschle's job of Senate Minority Leader. More on that is coming up. And we are still waiting this morning, the morning after, for an official winner of the presidential election to be declared. We're still waiting from the Kerry camp. That could happen anytime this morning. No official statement yet from the president himself, but his camp says he's the winner. Keep it locked into Fox. We'll be right back with much more. Waiting this morning to hear from the president himself, but if you've been watching, you know that his chief of staff, Andy Card, was out there early this morning saying that this is a historic win for the president, that we are convinced, he says, that President Bush has won re-election with at least 286 electoral college votes and a margin of more than 3.5 million popular votes. We're still waiting to hear from Camp Kerry. That could happen anytime this morning. Let's talk with Democratic strategist Steve Jarding and Republican strategist Ron Kaufman. And Steve, to you first. Tell me, what are you hearing about what's going on in Copley Square? Any idea when Kerry might emerge?
No, I don't know that there are a lot of people other than the people inside the Kerry household that know exactly what's going to happen. They're clearly talking about what needs to be done. They're talking about, the idea that maybe we need to have the votes counted, but do we want to wait these 10 or 11 days? So it's a decision they're going to have to make, and I suspect we will hear something shortly.
Steve, do you really think there's a possibility that John Kerry could come out today and say, we're going to wait 11 days?
Well, I suspect there's a possibility of that. Again, the numbers don't look good, and I think there's probably certainly a possibility, but it's more of a probability that he may come out and say it's not worth the effort and let's end this thing. But I would say, I mean, I saw the Ohio Republican Party issued a statement saying John Kerry should be a good American and